The night Eleanor Whitcomb discovered her husband's greatest secret, she stood alone in his locked study, staring at letters that could destroy them both. Duke Sebastian Arkwright, the man whose name commanded silence in Parliament, was protecting a woman who shouldn't exist, not a mistress, something far more dangerous. And Eleanor? She was supposed to be the perfect, obedient Duchess, the ornament on his arm, the solution to his political problems. But as footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, she made a choice that would either save their house or burn it to the ground. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this reaches. The wedding was perfect. Too perfect. Eleanor stood before the mirror in her dressing room at Blackthorn Manor, studying the woman reflected back at her. The ivory silk gown hung precisely as it should. The blackthorn diamonds, cold and heavy, pressed against her collarbone. Her dark hair was swept into an elaborate arrangement that had taken her lady's maid 3 hours to complete. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, the new Duchess of Blackthorn. She looked nothing like Eleanor. "You'll be the envy of London, my lady," her maid Margaret whispered, adjusting the final pin. The girl's hands trembled slightly. Everyone in the household seemed to tremble around the Duke. Eleanor didn't respond. What could she say? That she felt like a piece of furniture being moved into place? That the man she'd married 6 hours ago had looked at her exactly 3 times during the entire ceremony, and each time his eyes had held all the warmth of a January fog? The ceremony itself had been a performance worthy of the Royal Opera House. St. Margaret's Cathedral packed with every nobleman, politician, and social climber in England. The Archbishop's voice booming through the vaulted space. Sebastian's hand, strong, steady, completely impersonal, as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The kiss that sealed their vows had lasted precisely 2 seconds. She'd counted. "His Grace requests your presence in the library, my lady." Margaret's voice pulled her back to the present. Eleanor turned from the mirror. "Now?" "Yes, my lady. He said to come when you're ready." When you're ready. As if she'd ever be ready for whatever came next. The walk from her chambers to the library felt longer than it should. Blackthorn Manor sprawled like a Gothic cathedral, all dark wood and darker corners. The portraits of previous Arkwright dukes lined the hallways, their painted eyes following her progress. 17 generations of powerful men who'd bent Parliament to their will, crushed their enemies, and built an empire on land grants and political maneuvering. And now Sebastian, the most feared of them all. Eleanor had known what she was getting into, or thought she had. Her father, Lord Whitcomb, had made the arrangement clear over breakfast one morning 6 months ago, his newspaper rattling as he delivered the news like he was commenting on the weather. "The Duke of Blackthorn has made an offer. You'll marry him in the spring." No question, no discussion, just a fact, settled and certain as death. Her mother had cried, brief, delicate tears that she dabbed away with her handkerchief before they could stain her cheeks. "It's a tremendous honor, Eleanor. The Arkwrights are, well, they're as close to royalty as one can get without actually being royal." Eleanor had opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. What was the point? She was 23, unmarried, and her family's fortunes had been declining for years. The Whitcombs needed the Arkwrights' political protection. Sebastian needed a wife with an untarnished reputation and enough intelligence not to embarrass him at state dinners. It was business, cold, practical business. The library door stood open. Eleanor paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk positioned near the windows. And Sebastian, standing with his back to her, staring out at the darkening grounds. "You wanted to see me?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He turned slowly. In the lamplight, Sebastian Arkwright was undeniably handsome, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of smoke. His face was all sharp angles and harder edges, a face built for intimidation, not warmth. "Eleanor." He said her name like he was testing it. "I thought we should establish certain understandings." She stepped into the room. "Understandings? About our arrangement?" He moved to the desk, poured 2 glasses of brandy from a crystal decanter, and offered her one. "We're married now. The legal requirements have been satisfied, but I want to be clear about expectations." Eleanor took the glass but didn't drink. "Go on. You'll manage the household staff, attend social functions at my side, and represent the Arkwright name with appropriate dignity. In return, you'll have your own apartments, your own allowance, and the freedom to pursue whatever interests you find suitable for a duchess. How generous! She couldn't quite keep the edge from her voice. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or annoyance? I'm trying to be honest with you. Are you? Eleanor set the brandy down on a nearby table, untouched. Then let me be honest too. I know this marriage is political. I know you don't love me. I don't expect fairy tales or romance, but I won't be treated like I'm invisible in my own home. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I never said, you didn't have to. She met his eyes directly, refusing to look away first. During the ceremony, you looked at me like I was a particularly tedious business contract that needed signing. So let's not pretend this is anything other than what it is. You needed a wife. My father needed your influence. We both got what we wanted. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close to respect. You're more perceptive than I anticipated. Most people are more complicated than you anticipate, Your Grace. Sebastian, he corrected. We're married. You can use my name. Can I? Eleanor picked up her brandy after all, took a small sip. The liquid burned her throat. Or is that also subject to the understandings we're establishing? He actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. You have teeth, good. You'll need them in this family. Before Eleanor could ask what he meant, a knock sounded at the door. Sebastian's expression closed immediately, all that momentary warmth evaporating. Enter. The door opened to reveal a thin man in his 50s, with gray hair and the careful posture of someone used to moving through powerful spaces. Eleanor recognized him from the wedding, Arthur Pemberton, Sebastian's private secretary. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace. There's a matter that requires your immediate attention. Sebastian's face betrayed nothing. Now? I'm afraid so, sir. Eleanor watched the exchange, noting the tension in Pemberton's shoulders, the way Sebastian's hand curled into a fist before deliberately relaxing. I see. Sebastian turned to Eleanor. If you'll excuse me. Duty calls. Of course. She set down her glass. I'll retire to my chambers. She was halfway to the door when Sebastian spoke again. Eleanor. She paused, looked back. Thank you, he said quietly, for being honest. She nodded once, then left before he could see the confusion on her face. The first week of marriage passed in a blur of social obligations and careful distances. Eleanor learned the rhythms of Blackthorn Manor quickly. Sebastian rose early, took breakfast alone in his study, and spent his days either in meetings with various political allies or locked away with papers he never discussed. Dinners were formal affairs when they ate together at all, conversation limited to weather, upcoming events, and nothing of substance. They occupied separate wings of the manor, his in the east, hers in the west. They might as well have been in separate countries. Eleanor threw herself into learning her new role. She met with the household staff, reviewed the accounts, planned menus, and reorganized the linen closets with an efficiency that made the housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, openly weep with gratitude. The previous Duchess, bless her soul, never took much interest in the practical matters. Mrs. Patterson confided over tea one afternoon. It's a relief to have someone who cares. The previous Duchess? Eleanor hadn't heard much about Sebastian's mother. Mrs. Patterson's face grew somber. Died when his Grace was 12. Hunting accident. Terrible tragedy. How awful. Changed him, it did. The housekeeper lowered her voice, even though they were alone in the morning room. He was such a bright boy before, always laughing, always into some mischief. But after she died, she shook her head. The old Duke, Sebastian's father, he was a hard man. Harder still after losing his wife. Raised his Grace to be strong, to never show weakness. Eleanor absorbed this information, filing it away. It didn't excuse Sebastian's coldness, but it explained some of it. That night, she attended her first major social event as the Duchess of Blackthorn, a ball at the home of Lord and Lady Ashford. Eleanor wore emerald silk that complemented the Arkwright diamonds and made her dark eyes look almost black in the candlelight. Sebastian wore formal black, his face an aristocratic mask. They arrived fashionably late. The ballroom fell silent as they were announced. Their Graces, the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn. Eleanor felt every eye in the room fix on her, judging, assessing, comparing her to whatever they'd expected. Sebastian offered his arm. Ready? Do I have a choice? Not really. They descended the stairs together. Eleanor kept her spine straight, her expression pleasant but reserved. She'd been trained for this her whole life. How to move through high society, how to make small talk, how to be charming without being threatening. What she hadn't been trained for was the whispers. They followed her like smoke as she and Sebastian made their way through the crowd. Fragments of conversation, just loud enough to be heard. Quite lovely, but can she handle him? Cold as ice, that one. Perfect match, really. Heard he only married her to quiet the rumors. Eleanor's fingers tightened on Sebastian's arm. He glanced down at her, his expression unreadable. Ignore them, he murmured. They'll find something else to gossip about by next week. What rumors? His jaw clenched. Nothing that concerns you. But it did concern her. She was his wife now. Whatever shadows surrounded him, she stood in them too. The evening dragged on, an endless parade of forced smiles and meaningless conversation. Eleanor danced with several men, all of whom treated her with careful respect while their wives watched like hawks. Sebastian danced with her exactly once, a waltz that felt more like a military exercise than anything romantic. You're doing well, he said as they moved through the steps. I'm surviving. That's all anyone does at these events. When the dance ended, he excused himself to speak with some parliamentary colleagues, leaving Eleanor to navigate the social battlefield alone. She was making polite conversation with Lady Ashford when she noticed it, a flicker of movement near the garden doors. A woman slipping outside, followed moments later by a man. Not unusual. People often stepped out for air during balls. Except the man was Sebastian. Eleanor's breath caught. She forced herself to keep smiling, keep nodding at whatever Lady Ashford was saying about the weather and the upcoming season. But her mind raced. 10 minutes passed. 15. Sebastian didn't return. Excuse me, Eleanor said, interrupting Lady Ashford mid-sentence. I need some air. She made her way to the garden doors, trying to look casual. Outside, the autumn night was cool and sharp. Lanterns lit the main paths, but shadows pooled between the hedges. Eleanor followed the sound of voices, low, urgent, to a secluded corner near the fountain. She stopped just out of sight, her heart pounding. Can't keep doing this. That was Sebastian's voice, rough with emotion she'd never heard from him. I know. A woman's voice, cultured but strained. But what choice do we have? There has to be another way. There isn't. You know there isn't. Eleanor leaned closer, trying to see through the hedge. She caught a glimpse of Sebastian's profile, the tension in his shoulders. And the woman, dark hair, elegant dress, her hand on his arm in a gesture of intimacy that made Eleanor's stomach twist. I'm married now, Sebastian said. Things are different. Are they? The woman's voice held bitter amusement. You married her to protect yourself, to protect all of us. Don't pretend it changed anything. Isabella, no. The woman, Isabella, stepped back. We had our chance, we made our choices, now we live with them. Eleanor couldn't breathe. She backed away slowly, carefully, before they could discover her eavesdropping. Her mind spun with questions, with implications she didn't want to acknowledge. Isabella. Sebastian had a past with someone named Isabella, and whatever that past was, it wasn't over. Eleanor made her way back to the ballroom in a daze. She smiled when required, spoke when spoken to, and died a little inside with each passing minute. When Sebastian finally reappeared, his face was carefully blank. He didn't look at her differently, didn't acknowledge anything had happened, but something had happened. Eleanor knew it in her bones. On the carriage ride home, they sat in silence. Eleanor stared out the window at the dark London streets, her mind replaying the garden conversation over and over. You're quiet, Sebastian observed. I'm tired. The ball was exhausting. Yes, she didn't look at him. Exhausting. When they arrived at Blackthorn Manor, Sebastian escorted her to her chambers as propriety demanded. At her door, he paused. Thank you for tonight. You represented the family well. Eleanor met his eyes. That's what I'm here for, isn't it? Something in her tone made him frown. Eleanor, good night, Sebastian. She stepped into her room and closed the door before he could say more. Then she leaned against it, her hands shaking, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd discovered. Her husband was in love with someone else. Someone he'd given up to marry her. Someone he was still meeting in secret. And Eleanor had no idea what to do about it. Duchess. The next morning brought rain, cold, relentless sheets of it that turned the manor grounds into a watercolor of grays and browns. Eleanor woke early, her mind still churning with the previous night's discovery. She'd barely slept. Margaret helped her dress in a practical day gown, chattering about the household gossip. Apparently one of the footmen had proposed to a kitchen maid, and Mrs. Patterson was in a state about whether to allow them to continue working at the manor. "What do you think, my lady? Should they be permitted to stay?" Eleanor considered. "If they do their work well, why not? Love is rare enough. We shouldn't punish people for finding it." Margaret beamed. "I'll tell Mrs. Patterson you said so. She'll be so relieved." After breakfast, taken alone as always, Eleanor wandered through the manor, restless and unsettled. She found herself in the portrait gallery, studying the faces of previous Arkwright duchesses. They looked back at her with varying degrees of happiness, resignation, and in a few cases what appeared to be grim determination. "Lovely, aren't they?" Eleanor spun. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, leaning on a silver-handled cane. She wore black silk and pearls, her white hair swept into an elaborate coronet. Her face was lined but striking, with the same sharp features as Sebastian. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you approach," Eleanor said. The woman laughed. "I'm good at sneaking up on people, one of my few remaining pleasures." She moved into the gallery with surprising grace. "You must be Eleanor. I'm Beatrice Arkwright, Sebastian's aunt." "Your Grace." Eleanor curtsied. "Oh, none of that." Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. "I'm a dowager duchess twice over, and both my husbands are dead. I've earned the right to be informal." She studied Eleanor with keen blue eyes. "You're prettier than your portrait." Thank you. It's not a compliment, necessarily. Portraits lie. I wanted to see the real you." Beatrice moved to stand beside her, both of them facing the gallery of painted women. "Do you know what these women all had in common? They married Arkwright men. They survived Arkwright men." Beatrice tapped her cane on the floor. "This family has a talent for taking strong women and trying to break them. My mother-in-law hung herself in the East Tower. My sister-in-law, Sebastian's mother, was never the same after his father finished with her. And me?" She smiled grimly. "I outlived both my husbands out of pure spite." Eleanor didn't know how to respond to that. "I'm not trying to frighten you," Beatrice continued. "I'm trying to warn you. Sebastian is not like his father. Thank heaven for small mercies, but he carries his own demons, and demons have a way of destroying everything around them if you're not careful." "Why are you telling me this?" Beatrice turned to face her fully. "Because you have a spine. I saw it in your eyes just now. You're angry about something. Good. Anger is useful. It keeps you sharp." She paused. "He's protecting someone, isn't he? Someone he shouldn't be." Eleanor's breath caught. "How did you—" "I'm old, not blind. I've watched my nephew for years, watched him shoulder burdens that would crush lesser men. But this particular burden is different. It's personal." Beatrice's expression softened. "And it's destroying him." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You're just too smart to admit it out loud." Beatrice patted her arm. "When you're ready to know the truth, come find me. I live in the West Wing, 3 doors down from your chambers. Until then, keep your eyes open and your cards close." She left as quietly as she'd arrived, leaving Eleanor alone with the portraits and more questions than ever. Over the following weeks, Eleanor watched. She paid attention to Sebastian's patterns. When he left the manor, where he went, who he met with. She learned to read the subtle shifts in his mood, the way he grew tense when certain names were mentioned in conversation. And she began to see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. It happened gradually. A moment during dinner when he forgot to maintain his cold distance and actually laughed at something she said. An afternoon when she found him in the library, staring at nothing, his expression so lost that it made her chest ache. A conversation about estate management that turned into a genuine discussion about improving conditions for the tenant farmers. "You actually care," she said, surprised. He looked up from the papers spread across his desk. Why wouldn't I? Most of your peers don't. Most of my peers are idiots. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You've been managing the household accounts. Mrs. Patterson showed them to me. You cut our expenditures by 15% without reducing quality. Eleanor shrugged. We were paying too much for inferior goods. I renegotiated with better suppliers. Without asking my permission. She met his eyes. Should I have? For a long moment he just looked at her. Then, no, you're the Duchess. The household is your domain. He paused. You're good at this. At what? Being in charge. Most women of our class have no idea how to actually run a household. They just sign papers and let the staff handle everything. Most women of our class are taught that thinking is unladylike. Sebastian actually smiled, a real one this time, reaching his eyes. I'm glad you weren't. It was moments like these that confused Eleanor the most, because when Sebastian forgot to be distant, when he let his guard down even slightly, she caught glimpses of someone different, someone capable of warmth, someone she might have actually liked if circumstances were different. But then he'd withdraw again, disappearing for hours or days without explanation. And Eleanor would remember Isabella's voice in the garden. You married her to protect yourself, to protect all of us. Who was all of us? What was Sebastian protecting them from? Eleanor went looking for answers. She started in the library, combing through old newspapers and society columns. She searched for mentions of Isabella, of scandals, of anything that might explain Sebastian's secret meetings. But she found nothing concrete, just vague references to unfortunate incidents and social complications that had occurred several years ago. Looking for something specific, my lady? Eleanor jumped. Pemberton stood in the library doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Just reading, she said, closing the newspaper she'd been examining. Of course. He didn't move. If I may offer some advice, Your Grace? Please. The Duke is a complicated man with complicated responsibilities. Some matters are better left unexplored. Eleanor's spine stiffened. Are you warning me off? I'm suggesting that curiosity can be dangerous, especially in this family. And what if I'm not afraid of danger? Pemberton's expression flickered, something like respect. Then you're braver than most, or more foolish. He bowed slightly. Dinner will be served at 8, my lady. He left before she could respond. That night, Eleanor lay awake in her chambers, staring at the ceiling. Rain drummed against the windows. Somewhere in the east wing, Sebastian was awake too. She'd seen the light under his door when she'd passed by earlier. She threw back her covers and made a decision. The manor was dark as she made her way through the corridors, her dressing gown whispering against the floor. She'd dismissed Margaret hours ago. No one would see her wandering like a ghost through her own home. Sebastian's study door stood slightly ajar. Light spilled from the crack. Eleanor moved closer, silent, and peered inside. He sat at his desk, his head in his hands, surrounded by papers. He looked broken. That was the only word for it, like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear alone. Eleanor's hand rose to knock, hesitated. What would she say? What could she say? Before she could decide, Sebastian's voice cut through the silence. I know you're there, Eleanor. She froze. You can come in, or you can keep standing in the hallway. Your choice. Eleanor pushed the door open. Sebastian hadn't moved, hadn't even looked up. I couldn't sleep, she said. Neither could I. He finally raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. This is becoming a habit. You wandering the manor at night. You've noticed? I notice everything about you. He said it simply, without inflection. A fact, not a flirtation. You're my wife. It's my responsibility to notice. Eleanor moved into the room, drawn by something she couldn't name. Sebastian, what's wrong? Nothing that concerns you. Everything about you concerns me. We're married, remember? He laughed, a hollow sound. Is that what we are? Married? What else would you call it? A transaction, a political alliance, a very expensive solution to multiple problems. He stood, moved to the window. But a marriage. Marriages require trust, honesty, things I can't give you. Eleanor's heart pounded. Why not? Because some truths are too dangerous to share. She crossed to stand beside him. Outside, lightning illuminated the grounds in brief, stark flashes. I heard you. At the Ashford ball. In the garden. Sebastian went very still. How much did you hear? Enough to know you're protecting someone named Isabella. Enough to know you married me as part of that protection. She turned to face him. Who is she, Sebastian? For a long moment, he'd said nothing. Then, someone I loved, someone I failed. The admission hung between them, raw, painful. Do you still love her? Eleanor asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Yes. His voice cracked. No, I don't know anymore. He looked at her finally, his eyes desperate. Does it matter? To me? Yes. I'm your wife. You're my political shield, he corrected gently. Let's not pretend otherwise. The words hit like a slap. Eleanor stepped back. I see. Eleanor? No, you're right. I should remember my place. She moved toward the door, her vision blurring. Good night, Your Grace. Damn it, Eleanor, wait! But she was already gone, fleeing down the dark corridors toward her chambers, her chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to heartbreak. Which was ridiculous. You couldn't have your heart broken by someone who'd never claimed it in the first place. Could you? Eleanor didn't cry. She'd learned years ago that tears solved nothing. Instead, she paced her chambers like a caged animal, her mind racing through everything Sebastian had said and everything he hadn't. You're my political shield. The words kept echoing, sharp as broken glass. She was still pacing when dawn broke gray and cold over the grounds. Margaret knocked softly, bringing tea Eleanor didn't want and sympathy she couldn't accept. Are you well, my lady? You look… Fine. I'm fine. Eleanor's voice came out harder than she intended. Draw me a bath. The blue day dress. And tell Mrs. Patterson I'll be reviewing the household schedules this morning. Work. That's what she needed. Something concrete and controllable when everything else felt like it was slipping through her fingers. By the time Eleanor made it downstairs, Sebastian had already left for Parliament. Pemberton delivered the news with his usual careful neutrality, along with a sealed note on expensive paper. Eleanor broke the seal. Sebastian's handwriting was precise, controlled. E. I spoke poorly last night. Forgive me. We'll talk when I return. She crumpled the note. Forgive him? For what exactly? For being honest? For admitting what they both already knew, that their marriage was a carefully constructed lie? My lady? Pemberton's voice pulled her back. Is there a response? No. She smoothed her skirts. No response. She spent the morning buried in household accounts, estate correspondence, and menu planning, anything to keep her mind occupied. Mrs. Patterson seemed grateful for the attention, though she kept shooting Eleanor worried glances. Around noon, a visitor arrived. Lady Cressida Vane to see you, Your Grace, the butler announced. Eleanor looked up from the linen inventory she'd been pretending to care about. Cressida Vane. The name was familiar, one of London's most influential hostesses, known for her sharp wit and sharper tongue. Show her to the morning room. Cressida swept in like she owned the place, all elegant confidence in a burgundy walking dress that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. She was perhaps 40, still beautiful in that dangerous way some women managed, with dark eyes that missed nothing. Duchess Eleanor. Cressida's smile didn't reach her eyes. How kind of you to receive me. Lady Cressida. Eleanor gestured to the settee. Tea? Please. They went through the ritual, pouring, offering sugar, making meaningless pleasantries about the weather. Eleanor waited. Women like Cressida didn't make social calls without purpose. Finally, Cressida set down her cup. I suppose you're wondering why I'm here. The thought had crossed my mind. Direct. I like that. Cressida leaned back, studying Eleanor with those calculating eyes. I knew your husband's mother. We were girls together before she married into this family. Eleanor's pulse quickened. I didn't realize. Most people don't. Catherine and I were close once, before the Arkwrights destroyed her. Cressida's voice was matter-of-fact, almost casual. I tried to help her, tried to convince her to leave, but she loved Sebastian's father, fool that she was. Love makes idiots of us all. Why are you telling me this? Because history has a habit of repeating itself in this family. Cressida picked up her tea again, took a delicate sip. Your husband is a good man, better than his father ever was, but he's caught in something dangerous, something that will drag you down with him if you're not careful. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. What do you know about it? Enough to recognize the signs, the secretive meetings, the careful lies, the woman he can't quite let go of. Cressida's eyes sharpened. Isabella Vance. Does the name mean anything to you? There it was, out in the open. I've heard it, Eleanor said carefully. I'm sure you have. She's Sebastian's great tragedy, his great mistake, and possibly his great downfall, depending on how the next few months play out. You seem to know a lot about my husband's private affairs. I make it my business to know things. It's how I've survived this long in a world designed to destroy women like us. Cressida set down her cup. 5 years ago, there was a scandal. The details were suppressed, money changed hands, favors were called in, but the core of it remains. Isabella Vance was involved with several prominent men, including your husband. When the affair came to light, those men had to choose between their reputations and protecting her. Eleanor's stomach twisted. And Sebastian chose his reputation. Sebastian chose survival, for himself and for others. Cressida's expression softened slightly. It's more complicated than simple abandonment. There were blackmail threats, political pressures, families that would have been ruined. Sebastian made a deal. He'd marry respectably, distance himself from Isabella, and in exchange, certain people would ensure the scandal died quietly. But it didn't die. Scandals never truly die. They just wait in the dark, ready to resurface at the worst possible moment. Cressida stood, smoothing her skirts. I'm telling you this as a warning, Eleanor. Whatever game is being played, it's bigger than you realize. And the people involved won't hesitate to sacrifice pawns. Why warn me at all? What do you care what happens to me? Cressida moved toward the door, paused. Because I couldn't save Catherine. But maybe I can save you. She looked back over her shoulder. Be careful who you trust. Even the people who claim to love you can destroy you if you're not paying attention. She left before Eleanor could respond. Eleanor sat alone in the morning room, her mind spinning. Everything Cressida had said lined up with the fragments she'd already pieced together. But it also raised new questions. What kind of scandal required this level of secrecy? What had Isabella done, or been accused of doing, that still threatened Sebastian's position years later? And most importantly, what did Eleanor plan to do about it? She found herself walking to the West Wing, to the door Beatrice Arkwright had indicated weeks ago. She knocked. Come in, child. I've been expecting you. Beatrice sat in a chair by the window, embroidery in her lap that she clearly hadn't touched in hours. Her rooms were comfortable but sparse, none of the ornate excess that filled the rest of the manor. You said to come when I was ready to know the truth, Eleanor said without preamble. And are you? Ready? Eleanor thought about Sebastian's exhausted face in the study, about Isabella's voice in the garden, about Cressida's warnings and Pemberton's veiled threats. No, but I need to know anyway. Beatrice smiled grimly. Sit down. This will take a while. Eleanor sat. 5 years ago, Beatrice began, there was a house party at Lord Ashford's country estate. All the usual suspects, politicians, aristocrats, social climbers. Sebastian was there. So was Isabella Vance. Who is she? The daughter of a minor baron, clever and beautiful, and utterly unsuited for the life she was born into. She and Sebastian had been involved for about a year at that point. Quietly, of course. She wasn't of sufficient rank for him to marry openly, and he was under pressure from his father to make a strategic match. Eleanor's chest tightened. He loved her. He loved her the way young men love, passionately, recklessly, stupidly, and she loved him back, which made everything worse. Beatrice set aside her embroidery. At the house party, something happened. The details vary depending on who's telling the story, but the core facts are these. Isabella was found in a compromising position with Lord Ashford. There were witnesses, accusations. Ashford's wife threatened divorce. But Sebastian said he was protecting her, because the whole thing was a setup. Beatrice's voice turned sharp. Isabella didn't seduce Ashford. She was drugged. likely by Ashford himself, and placed in his rooms to create a scandal. Why? Because Ashford and several other men had been running an extortion scheme, using young women to compromise powerful targets, then blackmailing them. Isabella had discovered the scheme accidentally and threatened to expose them. Eleanor felt sick. So they framed her instead. Exactly. Made her look like a scheming seductress, ruined her reputation so thoroughly that no one would believe her accusations. It was brilliant, in a horrifying sort of way. Beatrice's hands clenched. Sebastian tried to defend her, tried to bring the truth to light, but Ashford and his co-conspirators had too much power, too many connections. They threatened to destroy not just Sebastian, but his entire family. Every political alliance his father had built over decades would crumble. The Arkwright name would be mud. So Sebastian chose his family over Isabella. He chose survival for everyone involved. Beatrice looked out the window. Isabella was exiled from society. Sebastian was ordered by his father to marry someone appropriate and forget her. The scandal was buried under layers of money and influence, and everyone pretended it never happened. Eleanor's mind raced. But it's not buried anymore. Something's changed. Very perceptive. Beatrice turned back to her. 3 months ago, someone started circulating the old rumors again, sending anonymous letters to influential families, dropping hints at social functions. Someone wants to resurrect the scandal. Who? That's what Sebastian's been trying to discover. And in the meantime, he's been protecting Isabella, making sure she has money, safe places to stay, warning her when danger gets too close. Beatrice's expression turned sad. He married you to create a shield, a respectable, unimpeachable Duchess, to deflect attention while he tries to solve this problem once and for all. Eleanor stood abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. Everything made sense now. The secretive meetings, the political maneuvering, the careful distance Sebastian maintained. He'd used her. Not maliciously, maybe. Not even consciously. But he'd still used her. I know what you're thinking, Beatrice said quietly, that you're just a pawn in someone else's game, that your marriage is a sham. Isn't it? That depends on what you do next. Beatrice met her eyes. You have choices, Eleanor. You can pretend ignorance, play the perfect Duchess, and let Sebastian handle this mess on his own. Safe. Simple. What most women in your position would do. Or you can fight, get involved, force your way into this dangerous game, and make yourself indispensable. Beatrice smiled slightly. I know which option I'd choose, but then I've never been particularly good at staying in my lane. Eleanor paced to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked grounds. In the distance, she could see Sebastian's carriage returning from London. A choice. That's what it came down to. She could be the decorative Duchess Sebastian had married her to be. Or she could be something more. I need to see the letters, Eleanor said. The anonymous ones threatening to expose the scandal. Beatrice's eyebrows rose. Why? Because if someone's orchestrating this, there will be patterns, clues, things Sebastian might miss because he's too close to it. Eleanor turned back. You said yourself, I need to make myself indispensable. And you think playing detective will accomplish that? I think sitting around waiting for disaster to strike is pointless. Eleanor's jaw set. Sebastian's been trying to protect everyone on his own. Maybe it's time someone protected him. Beatrice studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The letters are in Sebastian's study, locked in the middle drawer of his desk. The key's in the small Chinese box on the mantelpiece. How do you know all this? I'm a nosy old woman who's lived in this house for 40 years. I know where every secret is hidden. Beatrice picked up her embroidery again. Be careful, Eleanor. Once you step into this mess, there's no stepping back out. I understand. Do you? Because the people behind this, they've already destroyed one woman's life. They won't hesitate to destroy yours too. Eleanor thought about that, about the risks, the dangers, the very real possibility that she was about to make everything worse. Then she thought about Sebastian's face in the study, broken and alone. I'll take my chances. She left Beatrice's rooms and made her way toward Sebastian's study, her heart pounding. The manor felt different now. Shadows seemed deeper, corners more threatening. She was seeing it clearly for the first time, stripped of the elegant veneer. This wasn't a home. It was a battlefield. and she'd just volunteered for combat. The study door was locked, but Eleanor had expected that. She'd watched the servants enough to know which keys opened which doors. She retrieved the master key from the housekeeper's office. Mrs. Patterson was in the kitchens, reviewing dinner preparations, and let herself in. Sebastian's desk was neat, organized, everything in its place. She found the Chinese box on the mantelpiece exactly where Beatrice had said it would be. Inside, a small brass key. The middle drawer opened with a soft click. Inside were letters, dozens of them, in different hands on different papers. Eleanor spread them across the desk, her hands trembling slightly. Your secrets are not as buried as you believe. Perhaps the Duchess should know the truth about her husband's whore. Lady Isabella sends her regards. Or she would, if she weren't hiding like the coward she is. How long before Parliament learns the real reason the Duke married so hastily? Scandal has a way of surfacing at the worst moments. Eleanor read through them all, her stomach churning. They were vicious, calculated to wound. But more than that, they were coordinated. The timing was deliberate. Whoever was sending these was building toward something. What are you doing? Eleanor spun. Sebastian stood in the doorway, his face white with fury. Those are private. He crossed to the desk in 3 strides, snatching up the letters. You had no right. No right? Eleanor's fear crystallized into anger. I'm your wife. This affects me too. This is none of your concern. Everything about you is my concern. She grabbed one of the letters back. Someone's trying to destroy you, Sebastian. They're threatening Isabella, threatening your position, and I'll handle it. How? By keeping secrets? By pushing away everyone who tries to help? Eleanor threw the letter down. You can't do this alone. I've been doing it alone for 5 years. And look where it's gotten you. She gestured at the pile of letters. You're drowning, Sebastian. Too proud to ask for help. Too scared to trust anyone. Trust? His laugh was bitter. You want to talk about trust? You broke into my study, went through my private papers, because you won't talk to me. You keep me at arm's length, treat me like I'm made of glass. To protect you. I don't want protection. Eleanor's voice cracked. I want to be your partner, your ally, not some decorative piece you dust off for social functions. Silence crashed between them. Sebastian stared at her, something like shock in his eyes. You don't know what you're asking, he said finally. The people behind this, they're dangerous, powerful. They've already destroyed one person I cared about. I won't let them destroy you too. Eleanor stepped closer. Then tell me who they are. Let me help you fight them. Eleanor, I know about Isabella, about the scandal, about what really happened at that house party. She watched his expression shift from shock to fury to something like despair. Beatrice told me everything. Of course she did. Sebastian sank into his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. My aunt never could resist meddling. She was trying to help. She was trying to drag you into a war you're not equipped to fight. Eleanor pulled up a chair, sat across from him. Try me. For a long moment, Sebastian just looked at her. Then slowly, he opened the drawer again and pulled out another file. Thicker than the letters. More official looking. Lord Ashford, Lord Pemberton, and 3 other men, he said, quietly. They've been running an extortion ring for at least a decade, using women to compromise their targets, then blackmailing them for political favors, money, influence. Isabella stumbled onto evidence of it, ledgers, names, dates. She tried to expose them. They silenced her instead. By framing her. By making her look like she was the one doing the blackmailing. Brilliant, really. All the evidence pointed to her. And when I tried to defend her, they threatened to manufacture evidence implicating me too. He opened the file, showed her pages of careful notes. I've been gathering proof for years. Witnesses who might testify, financial records. But it's not enough. These men are too well connected. Every time I get close, they find a way to block me. Eleanor scanned the documents, names, dates, amounts, a careful web of corruption stretching through the highest levels of society. Why now? She asked. Why start sending these letters after 5 years? Because something's changed. I don't know what exactly. But someone's decided it's time to eliminate loose ends. Sebastian's voice was grim. Isabella received a direct threat last week. They know where she's been staying. They're closing in. Where is she now? Safe. For the moment. He didn't elaborate. Eleanor made a decision. Show me everything, every piece of evidence you've gathered, every witness you've identified, every connection you've mapped. Eleanor, I'm not asking for permission, Sebastian. I'm telling you, if we're going to stop these people, we do it together. She met his eyes. You said I was your political shield. Fine, let me actually shield you. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. This will be dangerous. I'm aware. If they discover you're helping me, then we'll deal with it. Eleanor leaned forward. I'm not fragile, Sebastian. Stop treating me like I am. He studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then finally, he nodded. All right. But we do this my way. Carefully. Cautiously. Agreed. He began pulling out more files, more documents. As Eleanor dug into the evidence, a pattern began to emerge. The extortion scheme wasn't random. It targeted specific men at specific times. Men with votes on crucial legislation, men with access to financial information, men who could be useful. It's political, she said, piecing it together. They're not just doing this for money, they're building power. Exactly. Sebastian pointed to a list of names. Every man they've compromised in the past 5 years has voted a certain way on key bills. Bills that benefit a specific group of investors. Who? That's what I haven't been able to determine. The money trail goes cold at a series of shell companies. He rubbed his face wearily. Without that final connection, I can't prove conspiracy. All I have is a string of coincidences. Eleanor's mind raced. Shell companies, hidden investors, political manipulation on a massive scale. We need someone on the inside, she said. Someone they trust. I've tried. Every informant I've cultivated has either disappeared or recanted their testimony. Then we don't use an informant. We use bait. Sebastian's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Think about it. They're sending these letters because they want something. Leverage over you, a way to control you. Eleanor's pulse quickened. What if we give them what they want? What if we make them think they have leverage? You're suggesting we let them blackmail us? I'm suggesting we give them rope to hang themselves with. Eleanor stood, pacing as the plan took shape. They think they've cornered you. They think one more push and you'll break, so we let them push. We draw them out into the open where we can see them. And how exactly do we do that? Eleanor turned to face him. By making a very public mistake. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. Explain. The Spring Gala. 3 weeks from now. Every powerful family in England will be there, including Ashford and his co-conspirators. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. What if there was a scandal at the gala? Something that made you look vulnerable, desperate. They'd move in for the kill. Exactly. And when they do, we'll be ready. She moved back to the desk, spreading out the documents. We document everything, we prepare testimony, and we make sure that when they make their move, we have irrefutable proof of conspiracy. Sebastian was quiet for a long time. It's risky. Everything worth doing is risky. If it goes wrong, then we're no worse off than we are now. Eleanor met his eyes. But if it works, we end this, once and for all. She could see him considering it, weighing the risks, the possibilities. What kind of scandal? He asked finally. Eleanor took a breath. The kind that makes it look like our marriage is falling apart, that I've discovered your affair with Isabella and I'm threatening to expose everything unless you pay me off. That would destroy your reputation, temporarily. But if we're careful, if we control the narrative, we can turn it around once we've caught them. She paused. Unless you have a better idea? Sebastian looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're serious about this. Completely. You realize this means people will say terrible things about you? That you'll be the subject of gossip and speculation? Let them talk. Eleanor's jaw set. I'd rather be talked about than be useless. Sebastian stood slowly, moved around the desk to stand directly in front of her. You're nothing like I expected. Is that a compliment? I'm not sure yet. But there was something in his eyes, warmth maybe, or respect. If we do this, there's no going back. Once we set this in motion, we see it through to the end. I understand. He held out his hand. Partners? Eleanor took it. His grip was firm, steady. Partners. For the first time since their wedding, it felt like the truth. They spent the next 3 hours planning. Every detail had to be perfect: the timing, the witnesses, the evidence they'd need. Eleanor's mind worked overtime, spotting gaps in Sebastian's strategy, suggesting alternatives. "You've done this before," Sebastian said at one point. "Done what?" "Strategized, planned. You think like a general." Eleanor shrugged. "My father used to let me sit in on his business meetings when I was young, before he decided it was unseemly for a girl to understand finance." She smiled grimly. "I learned to be useful in the shadows." "Well, you're not in the shadows anymore." No, she wasn't. They were so absorbed in their work that neither of them noticed the time until Pemberton knocked. "Dinner is served, Your Grace." Sebastian looked up, startled. "Already?" "It's past 8, sir." Eleanor gathered the documents quickly. "We should continue this after dinner." "Agreed." Sebastian locked the files away carefully. "And Eleanor, thank you." "For what?" "For not running when you learned the truth." He paused at the door. "Most people would have." "I'm not most people." "No." His smile was small but genuine. "You're definitely not." They walked to the dining room together, and for the first time it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like an alliance. Dinner was quiet but not uncomfortable. They discussed estate matters, upcoming social obligations, nothing that would interest eavesdropping servants. But beneath the mundane conversation, Eleanor could feel something shifting, a connection forming. They were halfway through the second course when Pemberton appeared again, his face pale. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but there's been an incident." Sebastian's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What kind of incident?" "A fire, sir, at the Vance property." Eleanor's blood went cold. The Vance property, Isabella's family home. Sebastian was on his feet instantly. "When?" "Reports came in 20 minutes ago. The house is—" Pemberton's voice faltered. "They're saying there was someone inside." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sebastian didn't wait to hear more. He was already moving, shouting for his horse to be saddled, for his coat. Eleanor followed him into the entrance hall. "Sebastian, stay here." His voice was harsh. "I mean it, Eleanor. Stay here where it's safe." "Like hell I will. This isn't a game anymore." "I know that." She grabbed his arm. "That's why I'm coming with you. If Isabella was in that house, if she's hurt, you'll need help. You'll need someone thinking clearly." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him because he nodded sharply. "Get your cloak. We leave in 2 minutes." The ride to the Vance property was brutal. Cold rain, muddy roads, the horses pushed to their limits. Eleanor's hands were numb by the time they arrived, but she barely noticed. The house was still burning. Orange flames licked at the sky, smoke billowing in thick black clouds. Servants and neighbors formed a bucket chain, fighting uselessly against the inferno. Sebastian was off his horse before it stopped moving. Was anyone inside? An older man, the groundskeeper, Eleanor guessed, looked up with haunted eyes. "Miss Isabella, Your Grace, she was in the east wing when it started. We couldn't— the flames moved too fast." Sebastian didn't wait to hear more. He started toward the house. "No!" Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Sebastian, you can't— let go of me. You'll die in there. Then I'll die." He turned on her, his face a mask of anguish. "I already let them destroy her once. I won't do it again." Eleanor's mind raced. The East Wing. She'd studied the property maps in Sebastian's files. There was a service entrance on the north side, less damaged by the flames. "There's another way in," she said quickly. "The north entrance, it leads to a passage that connects to the East Wing. If she's conscious, if she knows about it—" Sebastian's eyes sharpened. "Show me." They ran around the burning building, the heat intense even from a distance. The north entrance was intact, but smoke poured from the windows above it. "Wait here," Sebastian ordered. "Not a chance." "Eleanor, we don't have time to argue." She grabbed a bucket of water, doused her cloak. "2 people can search faster than 1. Now move." They plunged into the smoke together. The passage was narrow, dark, choking. Eleanor's eyes streamed as she felt her way along the wall, Sebastian's bulk just ahead of her. The roar of the flames grew louder. "Isabella!" Sebastian's voice was hoarse. "Isabella!" No response. They reached a junction. The passage split, left toward the main house, right toward the east wing. This way. Sebastian turned right. The heat was unbearable now. Eleanor's lungs burned with every breath. They stumbled through the darkness, calling Isabella's name. And then, a sound. Faint. A cough. Here! Sebastian surged forward. Isabella Vance lay crumpled against the wall, her dress torn and blackened, blood on her face. But alive. Conscious. Sebastian? Her voice was a whisper. I've got you. He gathered her up. Eleanor, lead the way back. They ran. The passage behind them collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber. Eleanor's heart hammered as she navigated by memory and instinct, praying she remembered the path correctly. The north entrance appeared ahead, smoke-filled but blessedly cool compared to the inferno behind them. They burst out into the rain, gasping, choking. Servants rushed forward. A doctor. Someone had the presence of mind to fetch a doctor. Sebastian laid Isabella down carefully as the physician bent over her. Eleanor stood back, her hands shaking, watching as Sebastian held Isabella's hand. The look on his face was raw, exposed. All his carefully maintained control stripped away. This was what love looked like, real love, the kind that made you run into burning buildings. And Eleanor had just helped save the woman her husband actually wanted. The thought should have hurt more than it did. The doctor worked quickly, his face grim but not hopeless. She'll live. Burns aren't severe, mostly smoke inhalation. She needs rest and clean air. Sebastian's shoulders sagged with relief. Then he looked up at Eleanor and something complicated passed between them. Thank you, he said quietly. Eleanor nodded, couldn't speak, didn't trust her voice. One of the local constables approached, his face serious. Your Grace, I need to ask, does Miss Vance have any enemies? Because this fire, it wasn't an accident. Sebastian's expression hardened. What makes you say that? We found evidence of accelerants, multiple points of origin. Someone wanted this house to burn, and they wanted to make sure whoever was inside didn't escape. Eleanor's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a warning anymore. Someone had tried to commit murder. And the game had just become deadly. The constable's words hung in the smoke-filled air like a noose. Sebastian's face went blank, the kind of blank that came before an explosion. Eleanor had seen that look before, in the study when she'd confronted him about the letters. But this was different. This was murder barely avoided, and whoever had set that fire had just declared open war. I want every inch of that property searched, Sebastian said, his voice deadly calm. Every witness questioned. Your Grace. The constable shifted uncomfortably. With respect, this is a matter for the authorities now. If someone's trying to kill Miss Vance, then the authorities have done a spectacular job protecting her so far, haven't they? Sebastian's tone could have cut glass. Forgive me if I don't trust her life to the same constabulary that's failed to investigate threats against her for the past 5 years. The constable's face reddened. I understand you're upset, but… Upset? Sebastian's laugh was harsh. A woman nearly burned alive in her own home, and you think I'm merely upset? Eleanor stepped forward before the situation could escalate further. Constable, perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere warmer? Miss Vance needs proper shelter, and standing in the rain helps no one. The constable seized the escape route gratefully. Of course, Your Grace. I'll send my report to Blackthorn Manor in the morning. He retreated quickly. Smart man. Sebastian turned back to Isabella, who the doctor was now wrapping in blankets. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the dangerous woman Eleanor had built up in her mind. Her face was smudged with soot, her hair singed at the ends, but her eyes were sharp, aware. Sebastian, Isabella whispered, they're not playing anymore. I know. They'll come after you next, after both of you. Her gaze shifted to Eleanor, assessing. You shouldn't have brought her here. She saved your life, Sebastian said flatly. She knew about the North Passage. Something flickered across Isabella's face. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. Thank you, she said to Eleanor. Though you might regret it before this is over. Probably, Eleanor agreed, but that's my choice to make. Isabella almost smiled. Almost. The doctor stood, gathering his supplies. She needs rest, somewhere safe. The smoke damaged her lungs. Another few minutes in there, and he didn't finish. Didn't need to. Sebastian's jaw clenched. She'll stay at Blackthorn Manor. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Of course. Where else could Isabella go? Her home was ash and ember, but bringing her to the manor, putting her under the same roof where Eleanor slept. That's not wise, Isabella said, echoing Eleanor's thoughts. The scandal alone. To hell with scandal. Sebastian's voice was steel. Someone just tried to murder you. I won't leave you vulnerable. Sebastian, this isn't a debate. He turned to one of his footmen. Prepare the blue guest suite. Have Mrs. Patterson ensure it's comfortable. The footman hesitated, glancing at Eleanor. She understood the unspoken question. Did the Duchess approve? Eleanor forced herself to nod. Do as His Grace says. What else could she do? Condemn a woman to death out of wounded pride? The ride back to Blackthorn Manor was silent and miserable. Isabella rode in the carriage with the doctor, too weak to sit a horse. Sebastian and Eleanor followed on horseback, the rain beating down like punishment. Eleanor's mind spun. Attempted murder changed everything. Their careful plan to draw out the conspirators at the gala, that was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks was a lifetime when someone was willing to set fires. We need to accelerate the timeline, she said, raising her voice over the rain. Sebastian glanced at her. What? Our plan. For the gala. We can't wait 3 weeks. They're escalating. I know that. His hands tightened on the reins. But rushing in without proper preparation is better than waiting until they succeed in killing someone. Eleanor guided her horse closer. Tonight proved they're not subtle anymore. They're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. They also kill people. Exactly. So we use that desperation against them. Her mind worked through possibilities. What if we move up the timeline? Create a smaller scandal, something more intimate. Force them to react before they're ready. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. What did you have in mind? The Pemberton dinner party. 5 days from now. Not as grand as the gala, but all the right people will be there, including Ashford. Arthur Pemberton is hosting? His wife is. It's their anniversary. Eleanor had seen the invitation weeks ago, filed it away as just another social obligation. Now it looked like opportunity. Small gathering, maybe 40 guests, intimate enough that anything scandalous would spread like wildfire. Sebastian's expression was unreadable in the darkness. And what scandal do you propose? Eleanor took a breath. This was the part he wouldn't like. I confront you publicly about Isabella. Accuse you of bringing your mistress into our home, make a scene. Absolutely not. It's perfect, Sebastian. Everyone knows Isabella's at the manor by now. Half the servants probably witnessed her arrival. By tomorrow, it'll be all over London. All I have to do is act like the wronged wife, which will destroy your reputation, temporarily. She cut him off. But it'll draw them out. Ashford and his people will see you vulnerable, distracted. They'll make their move. And if they make their move by setting another fire, by targeting you this time, Sebastian's voice was harsh. You saw what they did to Isabella. These aren't civilized men playing political games. They're murderers. I'm aware of that. Are you? Because you're talking about painting a target on your back with remarkable enthusiasm. Eleanor's temper flared. What would you have me do? Sit quietly while they pick us off one by one? While they destroy everyone you care about? I'd have you safe, and I'd have you see me as more than something fragile that needs protecting. The words burst out before she could stop them. I'm not your mother, Sebastian. I'm not some delicate thing that breaks under pressure. I can handle this. Sebastian reined his horse to a stop. They'd reached the manor gates. In the lamplight, his face was ravaged. Exhaustion, fear, and something else she couldn't name. My mother died because my father thought she could handle things she couldn't, he said quietly. Because he pushed her into situations that broke her. I won't make that mistake with you. The admission hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Sebastian, Isabella stays at the manor where I can protect her. You stay safe, and I'll handle Ashford and his conspirators my way. He spurred his horse forward, ending the conversation. Eleanor sat frozen for a moment, rain dripping down her face. Then she followed him inside, anger and hurt warring in her chest. The next few days were chaos barely contained. Isabella took up residence in the blue guest suite, and the manor staff whispered in corners. Mrs. Patterson was scandalized but professional. Margaret was openly curious. Pemberton moved through the house like a man walking on eggshells. And Eleanor? Eleanor played the role she'd been given, the dignified Duchess who pretended not to notice her husband's former lover sleeping 3 doors down from her own chambers. It was exhausting. She saw Sebastian rarely. He spent hours closeted with Isabella, going over everything she remembered about the fire. Eleanor told herself she didn't care, told herself the tight feeling in her chest was just stress. She was a terrible liar, even to herself. On the 3rd day, Eleanor knocked on the blue guest suite door. She'd avoided confronting this moment, but it couldn't be delayed forever. "Come in," Isabella's voice called. Eleanor entered. The room was comfortable but impersonal. Pale blue wallpaper, white furniture, nothing to make it feel like home. Isabella sat by the window, wrapped in a dressing gown, her face still showing faint bruises from the fire. "Duchess Eleanor." Isabella's tone was carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you. I thought we should talk." "Did you?" Isabella gestured to a chair. "By all means." Eleanor sat, studying the woman who'd occupied so much space in her thoughts. Up close, Isabella was beautiful in an unconventional way. Sharp features, intelligent eyes, the kind of face that commanded attention without demanding it. "I know what you must think of me," Isabella said when the silence stretched too long. "The scandalous woman who destroyed your husband's peace, the mistress in your home." "I don't think that." "No?" Isabella's eyebrow arched. "What do you think then?" Eleanor considered. "I think you loved Sebastian. I think you were used by powerful men and punished for trying to expose them. I think you're still being punished for it." Isabella's expression shifted. Surprise? Then something like respect. "You're not what I expected." "I could say the same about you." A ghost of a smile. "Sebastian chose well, even if he chose for the wrong reasons." The words stung, but Eleanor kept her face composed. "He told you about our arrangement. He didn't have to. I know Sebastian." Isabella turned back to the window. "He married you to protect me, to create a stable, respectable front while he tried to finish what I started 5 years ago. It was noble, stupid, but noble." "Stupid?" "Because he underestimated them. We both did." Isabella's hands clenched. "They're not just blackmailers anymore, Eleanor. They're cornered animals, and cornered animals kill." "Then we kill them first." Isabella turned sharply. "What?" "Metaphorically speaking." Eleanor leaned forward. "You started to expose them 5 years ago. Sebastian's been gathering evidence since, but neither of you could finish it alone. Maybe it's time to try a different approach." "What approach?" 3 minds instead of 2. Eleanor's voice was steady. "You know their methods. Sebastian knows their connections. I know how to navigate society, how to manipulate social situations to our advantage. Together we're still 3 people against an entire network of powerful men. 3 people they underestimate." Eleanor met Isabella's eyes. "They think I'm a decorative duchess. They think you're broken. They think Sebastian's too emotional about you to think clearly. We can use those assumptions." Isabella studied her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely. And you're willing to risk everything. Your reputation, your position, possibly your life?" Eleanor thought about that night in the study, watching Sebastian broken under the weight of secrets. Thought about the fire, the near miss of Isabella's murder. Thought about the choice she'd made to fight instead of hide. "Yes," she said simply. Isabella's laugh was short, sharp. "You really are perfect for him. Shame he's too blind to see it." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened. Sebastian stood in the entrance, his expression thunderous. "What's going on here?" "Your wife and I are plotting," Isabella said calmly. "You should join us." Sebastian looked between them, confusion replacing anger. "What?" Eleanor stood. "Sit down, Sebastian. We have work to do." For the next 2 hours, they planned. Isabella provided details about Ashford's operation that even Sebastian hadn't known. Names of other women who'd been used and discarded, patterns in the blackmail attempts, weak points in their network. "Ashford has a gambling problem," Isabella said. "Horses, mostly. He's in debt to several unsavory people. The blackmail money goes to pay them off. Sebastian wrote furiously. That's leverage. If we could get evidence of the debts, we can. Eleanor had an idea forming. Lady Pemberton's nephew runs a gambling house in Cheapside. Very discreet, caters to aristocrats who don't want their habits known. If Ashford gambles there, he does, Isabella confirmed. I saw him there once, years ago. Then we can get records. Eleanor turned to Sebastian. Your connections in Parliament, could you apply pressure? Make it clear the nephew would benefit from cooperation? Sebastian's eyes sharpened. Possibly. It would require calling in favors. Then call them in. Eleanor's voice was firm. We're past the point of saving political capital. They worked through the night, building a strategy. Not just for the Pemberton dinner party, but for what came after. Evidence gathering, witness preparation, a careful campaign to undermine Ashford's credibility before they moved openly against him. It was nearly dawn when Isabella finally stood, wincing. I need to rest. The doctor said, Go. Sebastian's voice was gentle. We can finish this later. Isabella paused at the door, looking back at Eleanor. Thank you for not hating me. I can't hate someone for loving him first, Eleanor said quietly. Something passed between the two women. Understanding, maybe. Or truce. After Isabella left, Sebastian and Eleanor remained in the study, surrounded by papers and plans. You surprise me, Sebastian said finally. In what way? Most women would have demanded Isabella leave, would have refused to work with her. Eleanor shrugged. Most women aren't in a political marriage to a man being blackmailed by murderers. Fair point. Sebastian rubbed his face tiredly. Eleanor, about what I said the other night, comparing you to my mother, you were scared. I understand. No, I was wrong. He met her eyes. You're nothing like her. She was kind, gentle, completely unprepared for the brutality of this life. He stopped, started again. You're strong in ways I didn't expect, in ways I should have recognized sooner. Eleanor's throat tightened. Sebastian, let me finish. He stood, moved closer. I married you for practical reasons, political reasons. I've treated you like a chess piece in a larger game that was unfair to you. We both knew what this was. Did we? Because somewhere between the wedding and now it became something different, at least for me. His voice dropped. You're not just my political shield anymore, Eleanor. You're my ally, my partner. And if I'm being honest, my friend. The word shouldn't have hurt. Friend. It was more than she'd had before, more than she'd expected. But after weeks of watching him with Isabella, seeing the love in his eyes when he looked at her, friend felt like consolation prize. I appreciate that, Eleanor managed. Sebastian frowned. Why do I feel like I said something wrong? You didn't. She gathered papers, needing something to do with her hands. It's late. We should rest before… Eleanor, look at me. She did. Mistake. In the lamplight, his face was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. How to be married to you while trying to protect Isabella. How to navigate between past and present, but I'm trying. I know you are. Do you? He stepped closer. Because sometimes I think you see me as the cold duke who only married you for political gain, and you're not entirely wrong. But that's not all I am. It's not all we could be. Eleanor's heart hammered. What are we then? I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. He reached up, almost touching her face, then dropped his hand. If you're willing. The vulnerability in his voice nearly undid her. She wanted to say yes, wanted to lean into whatever this moment was offering, but the image of him holding Isabella's hand after the fire, the raw love on his face. I need time, Eleanor whispered, to figure out what I want, what I can accept. Pain flickered across his expression, but he nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. He left her alone in the study as dawn broke over the grounds. Eleanor sank into a chair, her hands shaking. What did she want? A real marriage with a man who loved someone else? A partnership built on respect but not passion? Or should she accept the cold political arrangement they'd agreed to and stop hoping for more? She didn't know. And she had 5 days to figure it out before everything exploded at the Pemberton dinner party. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Eleanor was reviewing household accounts when Pemberton announced them. Lord and Lady Ashford, Your Grace. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Ashford. Here. Now. Show them to the morning room. I'll be right there. She found Sebastian in his study, Isabella with him. They were bent over documents, so absorbed they didn't hear her enter. Sebastian. Ashford's here. Both of them looked up sharply. What? Sebastian was on his feet instantly. Why? I don't know, but we need to handle this carefully. Eleanor's mind raced. This could be reconnaissance, or a threat, or it's my fault. Isabella's voice was small. He knows I'm here. He's come to assess the situation. Then let's give him something to assess. Eleanor's voice was steady despite her racing pulse. Sebastian, you'll receive them with me. Standard courtesy, nothing more. Isabella, stay here. Don't let anyone see you. Isabella nodded, face pale. Sebastian and Eleanor descended to the morning room together. Ashford and his wife stood by the windows. He was portly, red-faced, with calculating eyes. His wife was thin, nervous, clearly uncomfortable. Lord Ashford, Lady Ashford. Eleanor's voice was perfectly calibrated, polite, cool. What an unexpected pleasure. Your Grace. Ashford bowed slightly. Forgive the intrusion. We heard about the terrible fire at the Vance property and came to express our concern. Liar. Eleanor smiled. How thoughtful. Indeed. Ashford's eyes moved between them, assessing. We also heard that Miss Vance is recovering here at Blackthorn Manor, under your roof. There it was, the real reason for the visit. Miss Vance nearly died, Sebastian said flatly. I offered her sanctuary. Is there a problem with that? Of course not. Though one does wonder at the propriety. Ashford's smile didn't reach his eyes. Given your previous connection to the lady. Eleanor felt Sebastian tense beside her. She touched his arm lightly. A warning. Miss Vance is a family friend who needed help, Eleanor said smoothly. I'm sure you'd do the same for anyone in such dire circumstances. Naturally. Ashford turned to his wife. Wouldn't we, my dear? Lady Ashford nodded quickly, said nothing. Well, Ashford moved toward the door. We won't take more of your time, but perhaps you'll both attend our small gathering next week? Just a few friends. Intimate. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. We'd be delighted, Eleanor said before Sebastian could refuse. After they left, Sebastian turned on her. Why did you accept? Because refusing would show weakness. We need to appear unbothered, in control. Eleanor's mind worked through the implications. He's testing us, seeing how we react to pressure. He's threatening us. Yes, but he's also revealing his hand. Eleanor paced, thinking out loud. He came here personally instead of sending a note. That's aggressive. It means he's worried. About what? About Isabella being alive. About us sheltering her. Eleanor stopped. What if the fire wasn't just about silencing Isabella? What if it was also about breaking you, making you act rashly? Sebastian's expression darkened. And instead, we're more united than ever. Exactly. Which means we're unpredictable, dangerous. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. We need to capitalize on that. Make them more worried. How? Eleanor thought about it. About Ashford's calculating eyes, his wife's nervous silence. About the web of blackmail and corruption they'd mapped over the past days. We split them apart, she said slowly. Ashford's co-conspirators, they're not friends. They're allies of convenience, held together by mutual guilt. What if we made them suspect each other? Sebastian's eyes sharpened. Paranoia. Exactly. We plant seeds of doubt. Anonymous notes suggesting one of them is cooperating with authorities. Financial records that don't quite match up. Let them tear themselves apart from the inside. That's... Sebastian stopped. That's brilliant and vicious. I learned from the best. Eleanor met his eyes. Your Aunt Beatrice has been giving me lessons in aristocratic warfare. Sebastian actually laughed. Of course she has. They spent the rest of the day crafting their strategy. Carefully worded letters that would reach Ashford's allies anonymously. False financial trails that would raise questions. Eleanor even convinced Sebastian to leak a rumor through the servants. that Isabella had been keeping a detailed diary of her time with the conspirators, and it was now in safe hands. Will they believe it? Sebastian asked. They won't be able to afford not to. Eleanor sealed the last letter. Paranoid men see threats everywhere. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. Her mind churned with plans, contingencies, worst-case scenarios. She was wearing a path in her carpet when a knock sounded at her door. Come in? Isabella entered, wrapped in a shawl. I saw your light. Couldn't sleep either? No. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Isabella moved to the window seat, gestured for Eleanor to join her. I need to tell you something, Isabella said quietly. About Sebastian. Eleanor's stomach clenched. I don't think you need to hear this. Isabella's voice was firm. 5 years ago, when everything fell apart, Sebastian had a choice. He could have abandoned me completely, saved himself without question. But he didn't. He spent every penny he had trying to clear my name, called in every favor, made himself vulnerable when he didn't have to. I know he cared about you. It's more than that. Isabella turned to face her. He loved me. Maybe he still does in some way, but Eleanor... She paused. The man I loved 5 years ago? He doesn't exist anymore. Sebastian's changed. The guilt, the responsibility, it's reshaped him into someone different. Why are you telling me this? Because I see the way he looks at you when you're not watching. It's not the way he looked at me. Isabella's voice was sad but certain. With me, it was passion, fire. It burned bright and fast and left nothing but ash. With you, she smiled slightly. With you, it's different, steadier, stronger, like he's building something meant to last. Eleanor's throat tightened. He told you that? He didn't have to. I know him. Isabella stood. I'm telling you this because when this is over, if we survive, you two have a chance at something real. Don't waste it because you think you're competing with my ghost. She left before Eleanor could respond. Eleanor sat alone in the darkness, Isabella's words echoing. Building something meant to last. Was that true? Or was it wishful thinking from a woman trying to ease her own guilt? The Pemberton dinner party arrived too quickly. Eleanor dressed carefully. Emerald silk that made her look sophisticated, dangerous. The Arkwright diamonds around her throat felt less like jewelry and more like armor. In the mirror, she looked every inch a duchess. Cold, controlled, perfect. It was all performance. Sebastian knocked, entered without waiting for permission. He stopped when he saw her. You look, he swallowed. Formidable. Good. That's what I was aiming for. Eleanor turned from the mirror. Are you ready? As I'll ever be. They'd rehearsed this. The plan was simple, brutal. Eleanor would create a scene, accuse Sebastian of flaunting his mistress, storm out. It would make her look volatile, him look weak. Exactly the kind of vulnerability Ashford would exploit. The carriage ride to the Pemberton estate was silent. Eleanor's hands were ice cold despite her gloves. Sebastian stared out the window, his jaw tight. Last chance to back out, he said quietly. Not a chance. The Pemberton house blazed with light and laughter. 40 guests, just as Eleanor had predicted. All the right people, politicians, aristocrats, influencers. And in the corner, talking with a group of men in formal wear, Lord Ashford. His eyes found Eleanor immediately. Assessed, calculated. The first hour passed in agonizing normalcy. Small talk, wine, elaborate courses. Eleanor forced herself to eat, to smile, to play the perfect duchess. Beside her, Sebastian was equally controlled, equally false. And then, during the fish course, Eleanor made her move. I need some air. She stood abruptly, her voice just loud enough to carry to nearby tables. Sebastian looked up. Eleanor, don't. Her voice cracked, perfect, calculated emotion. Just don't. She walked out, aware of every eye tracking her movement. Sebastian followed, as planned. In the hallway outside the dining room, Eleanor turned on him. Her voice was low but fierce, audible to anyone listening. How long did you think I'd tolerate this? Her in our home, in my wing of the manor? Keep your voice down. Why? So your political friends won't hear that the Duke of Blackthorn keeps his mistress under the same roof as his wife? Eleanor's hands shook, not all of it acting. I've played the understanding spouse, Sebastian. I've smiled through the whispers, the pitying looks, but this is too much. You're being unreasonable. Am I? Isabella Vance nearly dies, and what do? Bring her to Blackthorn, spend hours closeted with her, treating her like she's... Eleanor's voice broke. Like she's your wife instead of me. Silence. Heavy, damning. Eleanor. Sebastian's voice was quiet, pleading. Not here. Not now. Then when? She laughed bitterly. You keep saying later, eventually, soon, but nothing changes. I'm still the woman you married for convenience, and she's still the woman you love. The words hit harder than she'd intended, because somewhere in the performance, they'd become true. That's not... Sebastian started, but Eleanor was already walking away, grabbing her cloak from a footman, fleeing into the night. The performance was over. Now they waited to see who took the bait. Eleanor didn't go home. She'd planned this part too. A safe house in the city, owned by Beatrice under a false name. Sebastian knew where to find her when the time came. She sat in the dark parlor, still in her emerald silk, and waited. An hour passed. 2. Then a knock at the door. Eleanor's heart hammered. She moved to the window, peered out. A carriage, unmarked, and a figure approaching the door, male, tall, wrapped in a dark cloak. This was it. Someone had followed her. Someone had taken the bait. Eleanor grabbed the fireplace poker, better than nothing, and positioned herself behind the door. When it opened, she'd have one chance. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Sebastian stood on the threshold, his face pale. Thank heavens, he breathed. I thought, what are you doing here? Eleanor lowered the poker. You're supposed to stay at the dinner. Let them approach you. They did approach me. Sebastian stepped inside, locked the door behind him. Ashford, 5 minutes after you left. He was very sympathetic, very understanding, offered to help me. Manage the situation. Manage how? He suggested Isabella might be more comfortable in a discreet facility. For her own protection, of course. Away from prying eyes and dramatic wives. Sebastian's voice was bitter. Translation. He wants her isolated so he can finish what the fire started. Eleanor's blood ran cold. What did you say? That I'd consider it. That I needed time to think. Sebastian moved to the window, checked the street. But Eleanor, he knows something. He was too confident, too sure of himself, like he has information we don't. What kind of information? Before Sebastian could answer, the window shattered. Eleanor screamed as glass exploded inward. Sebastian grabbed her, pulled her down as something heavy, a brick, skidded across the floor. Attached to it, a note. Sebastian grabbed it, read, his face going white. What? Eleanor demanded. What does it say? He handed it to her wordlessly. The message was brief, written in crude block letters. Back away, or the next one kills you both. And beneath it, a detail that made Eleanor's stomach drop, a lock of dark hair tied with ribbon. Isabella's hair. They have her, Sebastian whispered. They took her from the manor while we were at the dinner. Eleanor's mind raced. Isabella was gone, kidnapped, possibly already dead, and they'd walked right into the trap. The lock of dark hair gleamed in the lamplight like an accusation. Sebastian's hands shook as he held the note. Eleanor watched the color drain from his face, watched him transform from controlled duke to something raw and desperate. They took her from the manor, he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. From our home. While we were playing our stupid games. Stop. Eleanor's voice cut through his spiral. Falling apart helps no one. Least of all, Isabella. They're going to kill her. Not yet, they won't. Eleanor's mind worked through the logic, forcing emotion aside. Think, Sebastian. Why take her? Why not just kill her at the manor? Because... He stopped, trying to focus. Because they want something. Exactly. They want leverage, which means she's alive. Eleanor moved to the shattered window, careful of the glass. The street outside was empty, dark. They'll contact you again, soon, with demands. And if I don't comply, then we make sure you don't have to. Eleanor turned back to him. We've been playing defense this entire time, reacting to their moves. It's time we changed that. Sebastian looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Eleanor, they have Isabella. They're willing to murder, which is why we can't afford to panic. She grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. Listen to me. We have something they don't know about, something they can't account for. What? Me. Eleanor's voice was steady. They think I'm a scorned wife who just had a public breakdown. They think I've left you, that you're isolated and vulnerable. They're not watching me. Understanding dawned in Sebastian's expression. You want to investigate while they're focused on me. More than investigate? I want to find her. Eleanor moved to the table, began pulling on her gloves. Your Aunt Beatrice? She knows everyone in this city. Every secret, every hiding place. If Ashford's people took Isabella, someone saw something. Someone always sees something. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. Eleanor checked her reflection in a shard of broken glass, tucked a loose strand of hair back into place. But I can move through society in ways you can't. The wrong Duchess seeking sympathy, maybe a quiet drink with sympathetic friends. People talk to me because they think I'm harmless. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. You're terrifying, you know that? I'm learning. Eleanor picked up her cloak. Stay here. Wait for their next message. When they contact you, agree to whatever they ask. Stall them. Give me time. Eleanor, his hand caught her wrist. If something happens to you, it won't. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll be careful. She covered his hand with hers. Trust me, Sebastian. The way I'm trusting you. His fingers tightened briefly, then released. Find her, please. Eleanor slipped out into the night. The city at this hour was a different beast. Shadows and fog, the occasional carriage rattling past. Eleanor kept her hood up, her pace brisk but not panicked. She hailed a hack at the corner, gave the driver Beatrice's address in the West End. The ride took 20 minutes through increasingly elegant streets. Beatrice's townhouse was dark except for a single light in an upper window. Eleanor paid the driver, knocked sharply on the door. A moment later, an elderly butler answered. Your Grace, I need to see Lady Beatrice immediately. It's past midnight, my lady. I'm aware of the time. This is urgent. The butler hesitated, then stepped aside. I'll see if she's receiving. But Beatrice was already descending the stairs, wrapped in a burgundy dressing gown, her white hair loose around her shoulders. She looked simultaneously ancient and ageless. Eleanor, I heard about your performance at the Pemberton dinner. Half of London's talking about it. Her eyes sharpened. But that's not why you're here at this ungodly hour, is it? They took Isabella. Beatrice's expression went cold. Come upstairs, quietly. In Beatrice's private sitting room, Eleanor explained everything. The brick through the window, the lock of hair, Sebastian's fear. Beatrice listened without interrupting, her face giving nothing away. Ashford's getting sloppy, she said finally. Kidnapping is crude, not his usual style. Which means he's desperate. Or being pressured by someone above him. Beatrice moved to a cabinet, poured 2 glasses of brandy. The blackmail operation you've been investigating, it's bigger than Ashford. He's middle management at best. Eleanor took the offered glass. You know who's running it? I have suspicions. Nothing I can prove. Beatrice settled into her chair. But if Isabella's been taken, there are only a handful of places in London they could hold her. Properties owned by shell companies, houses maintained for exactly this purpose. I can give you a list. How do you know about these places? Beatrice's smile was grim. Because I used to own several of them myself. Before I decided I preferred being on the right side of history. She pulled out paper, began writing. But Eleanor, you can't simply walk into these places. They'll be guarded. Then I'll need help. What kind of help? Eleanor thought about the servants at Blackthorn Manor, their loyalty to Sebastian. Thought about Pemberton, his careful neutrality. Thought about all the people who'd been watching from the shadows, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. The kind that comes from making people choose sides. Beatrice's eyebrows rose. You're talking about forcing a confrontation. I'm talking about exposing them so publicly they can't hide anymore. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. Ashford thinks he's untouchable because everyone's too afraid to act. But what if we remove that fear? What if we gave people permission to fight back? By doing what exactly? Eleanor's mind raced through possibilities. The Royal Gala. It's in 2 days. Every powerful family in England will be there, including Ashford and his co-conspirators. And what if someone presented evidence of their crimes, publicly, in front of witnesses who couldn't be silenced or threatened? Eleanor leaned forward. Not anonymous letters or quiet investigations. A full, public accusation with proof. Beatrice was quiet, considering. That's incredibly risky. If the evidence isn't ironclad, it will be, because between now and then, we're going to find Isabella, and she's going to testify. Eleanor's jaw set. They've been using silence as a weapon. It's time we broke that silence. Beatrice studied her for a long moment. Then she stood, moved to a hidden panel in the wall. Behind it was a small safe. She worked the combination, pulled out a leather portfolio. These are copies of documents I've collected over the years, evidence of things I couldn't act on alone. She handed the portfolio to Eleanor. Financial records, witness statements, letters. Not everything you need, but a start. Eleanor opened it, scanned the contents. Her breath caught. This was damning. Proof of bribes, blackmail payments, connections to criminal enterprises. Why didn't you use this before? Because I had no power, no platform. I'm a twice-widowed old woman who society tolerates but doesn't respect. Beatrice's voice was sharp. But you? You're the Duchess of Blackthorn. When you speak, people listen, whether they want to or not. Eleanor closed the portfolio carefully. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is the part where everything gets worse before it gets better. Beatrice handed her the list of addresses. Find Isabella. Save her if you can. But Eleanor, she gripped Eleanor's arm. If you can't save her, you save yourself. Understood? Eleanor nodded, though she wasn't sure she meant it. The first address on Beatrice's list was a warehouse near the docks. Eleanor hired a different hack, gave the driver an address 2 streets over. She approached on foot, her heart hammering. The warehouse was dark, seemingly abandoned, but Eleanor had learned to look past surfaces there, a faint light in an upper window, and voices, low and male, from somewhere inside. She couldn't enter directly. Too dangerous. But the building next door had a fire escape, and if she could climb it, Eleanor hiked up her skirts, cursed the impracticality of fine silk, and began climbing. The metal was cold and slick with fog. Her hands ached, but she kept climbing until she reached a level with the lit window. Carefully, she edged along the narrow ledge between buildings, close enough to see inside now. 3 men in the room. One she recognized, Lord Ashford. The other 2 were rougher, hired muscle, probably. And in the corner, tied to a chair, Isabella. Alive. Bruised and disheveled, but alive. Eleanor's relief was sharp and immediate. She watched as Ashford paced, speaking to someone she couldn't see. Told you, it's handled. Blackthorn will cooperate once we send proof we have her. A voice Eleanor didn't recognize. And the Duchess? She's irrelevant. A hysteric who's fled back to her father's house by now. Ashford's laugh was ugly. She served her purpose. Made Blackthorn look weak. Now we can... Eleanor didn't wait to hear more. She'd seen enough. Isabella was here, alive, and Ashford was arrogant enough to keep her in the first location on Beatrice's list. Sloppy indeed. The climb down was harder than the climb up. Eleanor's muscles screamed in protest. But she made it to the ground, her mind already working through the next steps. She couldn't rescue Isabella alone, but she knew someone who could. Eleanor found a public house 3 streets over, slipped inside. The barkeeper looked up, surprised to see a well-dressed woman in such a rough establishment. I need to send a message, urgently, to Blackthorn Manor. She placed several coins on the bar. Can you arrange that? The barkeeper eyed the money. What kind of message? The kind that's worth triple those coins if it arrives within the hour. He pocketed the money. I'll see to it myself, my lady. Eleanor borrowed paper and pen, wrote quickly, S. Founder. Warehouse District, Copper Street. Bring men you trust. Come armed. Don't let them see you. Wait for my signal. She sealed it, pressed more coins into the barkeeper's hand. This is life or death. He must have believed her because he was out the door within minutes. Now came the hard part. The waiting. Eleanor positioned herself across from the warehouse, in the shadows of an alley, and watched. Men came and went. She counted them, 6 total, including Ashford. Enough to be dangerous, not enough to be impossible. An hour passed. Then another. Eleanor's legs cramped from standing still, but she didn't move. Finally, movement at the far end of the street. Sebastian, accompanied by 4 men Eleanor recognized from the Blackthorn stables, armed with pistols and clubs. Sebastian carried a pistol in each hand, his face set in hard lines. Eleanor stepped from the shadows just enough for him to see. He froze, then moved toward her with controlled urgency. "You found her!" His voice was rough with relief. "Upper floor, northwest corner, 6 men inside, at least 3 armed. Ashford's there personally." "How did you—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind. You're incredible." "Save the compliments. We need a plan." Eleanor pointed to the building. "Front entrance is the only way in. Windows are too high, but if we create a distraction—" "We?" Sebastian's eyes widened. "Eleanor, you're not going in there?" "Someone needs to make sure Isabella can move when the time comes. If she's injured, bound—" "Absolutely not. I won't risk you. It's not your choice." Eleanor's voice was steel. "We don't have time to argue. Every minute we waste is another minute they could move her, or worse." Sebastian looked like he wanted to argue, but he must have seen something in her expression because he nodded tightly. "Stay behind me, always." They approached the warehouse from 2 sides, Sebastian and 3 men at the front. Eleanor and the 4th man at a side entrance the guards probably didn't know existed. Beatrice's intel included building plans. The side door was locked, but old. Eleanor's companion, a stable hand named Thomas, made quick work of it with a crowbar. They slipped inside, Eleanor's heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The interior was dark, smelling of oil and rot. Eleanor let her eyes adjust, then began moving toward the stairs. Thomas followed, silent as a ghost. Voices from above. Male, aggressive. "Don't care what Blackthorn wants. The orders are clear. Once we have his compliance, she's a liability." A gunshot shattered the night. Eleanor froze. That had come from the front of the building, Sebastian's entrance. Chaos erupted, shouting, running footsteps. Another shot. "Go!" Thomas pushed Eleanor toward the stairs. "Get the lady!" Eleanor ran, her skirts tangled around her legs, slowing her down. She cursed, hiked them higher, kept climbing. The upper floor was a maze of rooms and corridors. Eleanor followed the sounds of struggle, crashing, male voices shouting. She burst into the northwest room. Isabella sat bound to the chair, her eyes wide. One of the guards stood over her, knife drawn. "Take another step and I slit her throat," he snarled. Eleanor stopped. Her mind raced. No weapon, no plan. Just her and this man and Isabella bleeding from a cut on her cheek. "You don't want to do that," Eleanor said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Don't I?" "Think about it. Right now you're a kidnapper. Maybe you serve time, maybe you don't. But if you kill her—" Eleanor took a small step forward. "That's murder, hanging murder. Is Ashford worth dying for?" Uncertainty flickered across his face. "They're not paying you enough for this," Eleanor continued, taking another step. "Whatever they promised, it's not worth your life." "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know that right now you have a choice. You can let her go, walk away, disappear before the authorities arrive. Or you can kill Apir's daughter and guarantee your own death." Eleanor's voice was calm, reasonable. "Which sounds smarter to you?" The guard's knife wavered. A crash from the doorway. Sebastian burst in, pistol raised. "Step away from her!" The guard spun toward him. Eleanor didn't think. She grabbed a heavy candlestick from a nearby table and swung it at the guard's head with all her strength. He went down hard. For a moment, everyone froze. Then Sebastian was cutting Isabella free. Eleanor was checking the guard's pulse, alive, unconscious. And somewhere downstairs, men were shouting. "Can you walk?" Sebastian asked Isabella. "I think so." Her voice was hoarse. "Sebastian, they're planning something bigger. I heard them talking. The Royal Gala." "We know." Eleanor helped her stand. "We'll discuss it later. Right now, we need to leave." They made their way downstairs, Sebastian supporting Isabella. The warehouse's main room was a disaster. Overturned crates, 2 men unconscious on the floor, one of Sebastian's men holding 3 others at gunpoint, but no sign of Ashford. "He ran," Thomas reported, "out the back when the fighting started." "Let him run." Eleanor's voice was cold. "We have what we came for." The ride back to Blackthorn Manor was tense. Isabella leaned against Sebastian, exhausted and hurting. Eleanor sat across from them, watching the way Sebastian held her, protective, gentle, the way he'd always held her. She waited for the jealousy to hit. It didn't come. Or if it did, it was muted, distant, because she'd just faced down a man with a knife. She'd planned a rescue. She'd stopped being the decorative Duchess somewhere between the Pemberton dinner and this moment, and that mattered more than jealousy. At the manor, the doctor was summoned. Mrs. Patterson fussed over Isabella, scandalized and motherly at once. Eleanor retreated to her chambers, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. She was half asleep when someone knocked. "Come in." Sebastian entered, looking as wrecked as Eleanor felt. "I wanted to thank you for finding her, for—" He stopped. "For everything." "You're welcome." He sat in the chair by her fireplace, ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know how to do this. How to thank you properly. You saved her life tonight." "We saved her life. Together." "Yes, together." He looked up at her. "Eleanor, what you said at the dinner party, about being the woman I married for convenience while Isabella's the one I love." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Sebastian, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He leaned forward. "Because it's not true. Or it wasn't entirely true. I did love Isabella. Maybe part of me still does, the way you love memories, the way you love what could have been." He paused. "But you, what we're building, that's real, present. Something I want, not something I'm holding on to out of guilt." Eleanor couldn't breathe. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I married you for practical reasons, but I'd choose you for real ones." His voice was raw. "If we survive the next few days, if we somehow manage to beat Ashford and his conspirators, I want to try being married to you. Actually married. Not politics or strategy, but partnership," Eleanor finished softly. "Built on truth." "Yes." She stood, moved to where he sat, touched his face gently. "Ask me again after the gala, when we're not running for our lives." Sebastian caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "It's a date." He left, and Eleanor collapsed onto her bed, her mind spinning. Tomorrow, they'd plan. Tomorrow, they'd prepare for the confrontation at the Royal Gala. Tomorrow, they'd figure out how to expose Ashford and his network publicly. But tonight, she'd let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd survive this. The next day brought a flurry of activity. Isabella, recovered enough to walk with just a slight limp, joined Eleanor and Sebastian in the study. Beatrice arrived mid-morning, bringing more documents. Even Pemberton contributed, revealing that he'd been quietly documenting Ashford's activities for years, waiting for someone brave enough to act. "I'm not a brave man," Pemberton admitted, "but I'm tired of being a coward." They spread everything across Sebastian's desk: financial records, witness statements, dates, and times of blackmail payments. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. "The question is presentation," Eleanor said. "We can't just stand up at the gala and start reading accusations. We need to do this properly." "The Queen will be in attendance," Beatrice noted, "as will the Prime Minister. If we can get their attention." "We petition for a formal hearing," Sebastian finished. "Present the evidence to Her Majesty directly. With that many witnesses, Ashford can't suppress it." "He'll try to discredit us," Isabella warned. "He'll bring up the old scandal, make me look like a liar." "Let him try." Eleanor's voice was firm. "We have 5 years of evidence showing a pattern of behavior. One woman's testimony might be dismissed. 5 women's testimonies? 10? That's a conspiracy." Beatrice smiled slowly. "You want to bring them all forward. Every woman they've used and discarded. Every person they've blackmailed." Eleanor's excitement grew. "We don't present this as Isabella's story or Sebastian's story. We present it as a systematic pattern of criminal behavior." "That's—" Sebastian stopped. "That could actually work." "It will work," Eleanor corrected, "but we need to move fast. The gala is tomorrow night. We need to contact every potential witness today." They divided the tasks. Beatrice would reach out to the women. She knew most of them, had maintained quiet friendships over the years. Pemberton would handle the men who'd been blackmailed, offering them immunity in exchange for testimony. Sebastian would prepare the formal presentation, organizing evidence in a way that would be clear even to people with no legal background. And Eleanor? Eleanor would write the speech, the opening statement that would either save them all or destroy them completely. She worked through the afternoon, drafting and redrafting. The words had to be perfect. Compelling but not melodramatic, serious but accessible. She was on her 7th version when Isabella knocked. "May I come in?" Eleanor gestured to a chair. "Of course." Isabella sat, studying Eleanor with those sharp eyes. "You're good at this. The strategy, the planning, better than Sebastian even. He's too close to it emotionally. And you're not?" Isabella's eyebrow arched. "I've seen the way you look at him." Eleanor's hand stilled on the paper. "That's none of your concern. Maybe not, but I wanted to say something anyway." Isabella leaned forward. 5 years ago, I loved Sebastian with everything I had. It was consuming, passionate, the kind of love people write poetry about. And it nearly destroyed us both. Why are you telling me this? Because what you two have is different. It's built on respect, trust, partnership. It's not as romantic, maybe, but it's stronger. Isabella's voice was quiet. "After tomorrow, I'm leaving London, starting over somewhere far from here, and I want to leave knowing Sebastian's in good hands." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You don't have to leave." "Yes, I do, for all of us." Isabella stood. "But thank you for saving me, for being brave enough to fight when I couldn't anymore." She left before Eleanor could respond. Eleanor returned to her speech, but the words blurred. Tomorrow would change everything. Either they'd win, expose Ashford's network, clear Isabella's name, secure their future, or they'd lose spectacularly, publicly, permanently. There was no middle ground anymore. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She wandered the manor's dark corridors, her mind too active to rest. She found herself in the portrait gallery, staring up at the previous duchesses. "Can't sleep either?" Eleanor turned. Sebastian stood in the doorway, still dressed, equally restless. "Too much to think about," she admitted. He joined her, both of them studying the paintings. "My mother hung herself in the East Tower," he said quietly. "Did Beatrice tell you that?" "She mentioned it. My father drove her to it, not intentionally, but through constant pressure, constant demands. She couldn't handle the weight of being an Arkwright Duchess." He turned to Eleanor. "That's why I've been so protective of you, why I tried to keep you out of the dangerous parts. I kept seeing her in you. But I'm not her." "No, you're nothing like her." His voice was warm. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met, braver, more capable." He paused. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." Eleanor touched his arm. "We're going to win tomorrow." "How can you be sure?" "Because we have something they don't. We have truth, and we have each other." She smiled slightly. "That has to count for something." Sebastian pulled her close, held her tight. They stood that way for a long time, drawing strength from each other. Tomorrow would be a battle. But tonight, they had this moment of peace. The royal gala dawned cold and clear. Eleanor dressed in midnight blue silk, the Arkwright diamonds glittering at her throat like captured stars. In the mirror, she looked regal, powerful, a duchess who could command attention. Sebastian wore formal black, his expression set in hard lines. Together they looked like exactly what they were, aristocrats prepared for war. The carriage ride to the palace was silent. Eleanor clutched the portfolio of evidence, her prepared speech memorized but written down as backup. Beside her, Sebastian radiated controlled tension. "Whatever happens," he started. "We survive," Eleanor finished. "Together." He squeezed her hand. The palace ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, hundreds of aristocrats in their finest. Eleanor scanned the crowd, identifying key players. Ashford, looking confident and smug. The Prime Minister in conversation with several ministers. And there, on the raised dais, Her Majesty, Queen Victoria herself. "Ready?" Sebastian murmured. Eleanor nodded. They'd timed this carefully. The formal presentations would happen after dinner, during the social hour. Sebastian had secured a spot on the presentation list, nominally to discuss a new charitable foundation. But that wasn't what he'd be discussing. Dinner was torture. Eleanor forced down food she couldn't taste, made conversation she didn't hear. Across the room, Ashford watched them with calculating eyes. He knew something was coming, but he didn't know what. Finally, the presentations began. Minor nobles discussing minor issues, agricultural improvements, trade negotiations, social reforms. The crowd was bored, restless. Then the major domo announced, "His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorn." Sebastian stood. Eleanor's heart hammered. This was it. Sebastian walked to the presentation platform, every eye tracking his movement. He carried no papers, no notes, just his voice and his truth. "Your Majesty, Prime Minister, esteemed guests." His voice was clear, commanding. "I come before you tonight not to discuss charitable foundations, but to expose a criminal conspiracy that has corrupted the highest levels of our society for over a decade." Immediate reaction, gasps, whispers, confusion. Ashford's face went white. "I have evidence, documented, irrefutable evidence of a blackmail and extortion ring operating within the aristocracy. This ring has used vulnerable women to compromise powerful men, then leveraged that compromise for political and financial gain." The major domo started forward, clearly intending to stop this, but Sebastian raised his voice. "The men responsible include Lord Ashford, Lord Pemberton." "That's a lie!" Ashford was on his feet. "Your Majesty, this is slander. The Duke is emotionally compromised. Everyone knows he's been—" "I have witnesses," Sebastian cut him off. "Women who were used, men who were blackmailed, financial records proving payment. I petition Your Majesty for a formal inquiry." Silence crashed through the ballroom. Then Eleanor stood. Her legs shook, but her voice was steady. "I have additional evidence, Your Majesty. Documents collected over 5 years showing systematic criminal activity." She moved to the platform, stood beside Sebastian, presented the portfolio to a shocked attendant who carried it to the Queen. Victoria opened it, read. Her expression grew darker with each page. "These are serious accusations," she said finally. "They are, Your Majesty." Eleanor's voice rang through the ballroom. "Which is why we're making them publicly, in front of witnesses who cannot be silenced. Because for too long these men have used fear and shame to control their victims. Tonight, that ends." The ballroom erupted. Ashford tried to flee, but guards moved to block him. Sebastian had arranged that too. One by one, witnesses came forward. Women Eleanor had never met, men she recognized from society pages, all telling the same story: blackmail, extortion, lives destroyed. It was devastating, damning. By the time the last witness finished, Ashford was surrounded by guards and the Queen's face was carved from ice. "Lord Ashford," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "you will submit to immediate investigation, as will all men named in these testimonies." She stood. "Guards, detain them!" It was over. Eleanor felt her legs give out. Sebastian caught her, held her upright. Around them, the ballroom buzzed with shock and scandal and the beginning of justice. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd actually done it. Later, much later, after statements had been taken and guards had led Ashford away in chains, Eleanor and Sebastian stood on the palace balcony. Dawn was breaking over London, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "We did it," Sebastian said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "We did!" Eleanor leaned against him, exhausted and exhilarated. "Eleanor," he turned to face her. "What I said the other night, about wanting to try being actually married." "Yes," she interrupted. "Yes?" "Yes, I want that too." Eleanor smiled. "A real marriage, built on truth and partnership and—" He kissed her, finally, properly, without holding back. It was desperate and sweet and felt like coming home. When they broke apart, both breathless, Sebastian laughed. "I was going to propose properly, maybe bend on one knee. We're already married, I know, but I want to do it right this time." He took her hands. "Eleanor Whitcomb Arkwright, will you marry me, again, for real reasons instead of political ones?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Happy ones. "Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes." In the distance, London woke to news of the scandal that would rock the aristocracy for years. But on that balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, Eleanor and Sebastian had already won the only victory that mattered. They'd found each other. Finally, truly. And they were just beginning. The kiss ended, but the dawn kept coming, relentless, beautiful, painting London in colors that promised new beginnings. Eleanor rested her forehead against Sebastian's, both of them breathing hard, both of them smiling like fools. "We should go home," Sebastian murmured, "before the entire palace staff finds the Duke and Duchess making spectacles of themselves on the balcony." "Let them talk. They'll be talking about us anyway after tonight." "Fair point." He kissed her again, softer this time. "But I want to do this properly. Take you home. Start our real marriage in our real home." Eleanor nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was fading, leaving her bones heavy and her mind fuzzy. Home sounds perfect. They made their way through the palace corridors, past clusters of nobles still whispering about the scandal. More than one person stared as they passed. Eleanor kept her head high, her hand steady on Sebastian's arm. Let them stare. She'd earned this moment. The carriage ride to Blackthorn Manor felt different than any ride before it. Sebastian kept her hand clasped in his thumb tracing absent patterns on her palm. Neither spoke much. They didn't need to, but reality was waiting at the manor gates. A crowd had gathered, reporters, curiosity seekers, people who'd heard rumors and wanted confirmation. The guards were struggling to keep them back. "Your Grace, is it true Lord Ashford's been arrested?" "Duchess Eleanor, did you really present evidence to the Queen?" "What happens to the blackmail victims?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "I'll handle this." "No." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "We handle it together." She stepped from the carriage before the footman could assist her, Sebastian close behind. The crowd pressed forward, shouting questions. Eleanor raised her hand and somehow, miraculously, they quieted. "A criminal conspiracy has been exposed tonight," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Justice will be served. That's all we can say at this time. Please respect our privacy." She didn't wait for more questions, just walked through the gates with Sebastian, leaving the chaos behind. Inside the manor, the staff lined up in the entrance hall. Mrs. Patterson, Pemberton, Margaret, Thomas, all of them. Waiting, watching. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward first. "Your Graces, we heard what happened, what you did." Her voice wavered. "We're proud to serve you." The others murmured agreement. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. These people, servants she'd been so careful to maintain proper distance from, were looking at her like she was a hero. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you. For your loyalty, your discretion. We couldn't have done this without you." Pemberton cleared his throat. "If I may, Your Grace, there are several urgent messages from Parliament, from the Queen's Secretary, from various peers requesting meetings." "Tomorrow," Sebastian said firmly. "Tonight we rest." "Of course, sir." The staff dispersed, leaving Sebastian and Eleanor alone in the grand entrance hall. The portraits of previous Arkwright dukes stared down at them, stern and judgmental as always. "They look less intimidating now," Eleanor observed. Sebastian followed her gaze. "You've faced down worse than painted ancestors." "So have you." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I'm terrified," he admitted quietly. "Of what? That I'll wake up, and this will all be a dream. That I'll still be that man who married you out of desperation, who couldn't see what was right in front of him." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. "Sebastian, you're exhausted. We both are. Let's get some sleep. The world will still be here in the morning. Will you—" He stopped, started again. "Will you stay with me tonight in my chambers? I don't want to be apart from you." Eleanor's heart skipped. "Yes." They climbed the stairs together, passing the west wing where Eleanor's chambers stood empty, continuing to the east wing where Sebastian's rooms waited. She'd never been inside before, had deliberately avoided them, not wanting to intrude. The Duke's chambers were surprisingly austere, dark wood, minimal decoration, shelves crammed with books and papers. The bed was massive but unmade, like he'd left it in a hurry days ago and never returned. "It's a mess," Sebastian said, suddenly self-conscious. "I wasn't expecting—" "It's fine." Eleanor kicked off her shoes, began unpinning her hair. The elaborate style Mrs. Patterson had created for the gala came down in pieces, dark waves falling around her shoulders. Sebastian watched her, his expression unreadable. "You're beautiful." "I'm exhausted and probably have ink stains on my fingers from all that writing." "Still beautiful." Eleanor crossed to him, began working on his cravat. "Help me with these buttons. I can't reach the back of my dress." They undressed each other slowly, carefully, not with passion, but with tenderness. This wasn't about desire, not yet. This was about trust, about being vulnerable with each other in ways that had nothing to do with politics or strategy. When they finally climbed into bed, both in nightclothes, Sebastian pulled Eleanor against his chest and held her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. On us." Eleanor laced her fingers through his. "Thank you for finally seeing me." They fell asleep tangled together, exhausted and safe. The next week was chaos of a different kind. Parliament launched a formal inquiry into Ashford's network. Every day brought new revelations, more victims coming forward, more men implicated, connections reaching higher than anyone had suspected. It turned out Ashford wasn't the mastermind at all. He'd been middle management for a network that included 2 cabinet ministers and a duke. Eleanor sat through testimony after testimony, Sebastian beside her. They'd become the unlikely faces of the scandal, the Duke and Duchess who'd risked everything to expose corruption. Newspapers ran sketches of them, editorials praising their courage. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and occasionally terrifying. "I got another death threat today," Eleanor mentioned over breakfast one morning. Sebastian looked up sharply from his newspaper. "What?" "Third one this week." Mrs. Patterson intercepted it. Eleanor buttered her toast calmly. "Apparently some people think I'm a troublemaker who doesn't know her place." "Eleanor, this isn't something to joke about." "I'm not joking. I'm just not letting them scare me." She met his eyes. "We knew there would be backlash. People whose interests we've threatened, men who benefited from the old system. They're angry. Let them be angry." Sebastian set down his paper. "You're terrifying, you know that? You've mentioned it before." He smiled despite his worry. "What are you working on today?" "Meeting with 5 more women who want to testify. Then reviewing financial documents with Beatrice. Then dinner with your aunt who's promised to teach me the finer points of political blackmail. The legal kind." "You're enjoying this." It wasn't a question. Eleanor considered. "I'm enjoying having purpose. Being useful. Making a difference." She paused. "Is that wrong?" "No. It's perfect." Sebastian stood, came around the table to kiss her forehead. "I have Parliament sessions all day, but I'll be home for dinner." "I'll be here." It was domestic and normal and everything their marriage hadn't been before. Eleanor treasured it. The testimony hearings took 3 weeks. Eleanor sat through all of it, the women who'd been used, the men who'd been blackmailed, the financial experts who traced money through shell companies to the real puppet masters. It was brutal and necessary and transformative. On the final day, Isabella testified. She'd stayed in London despite her plans to leave, determined to see this through. Eleanor watched from the gallery as Isabella took the stand, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the courtroom. 5 years ago, I discovered evidence of systematic blackmail. I tried to expose it and was destroyed for that attempt. They framed me, ruined my reputation, made me look like the criminal. Isabella's voice didn't waver. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because no one else should suffer what I suffered. The defense attorney, representing several of the accused men, tried to discredit her. Brought up her past, her relationship with Sebastian, implied she was lying out of bitterness. Eleanor watched Isabella deflect every attack with calm precision. This woman was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. When it was over, the courtroom erupted in applause. The judge had to bang his gavel for order. Outside, Eleanor found Isabella sitting on a bench in the courthouse garden, her face pale but composed. "You were incredible in there," Eleanor said. Isabella looked up, surprised. "Thank you. I kept thinking I'd break down, but..." She shrugged. "Turns out I'm more resilient than I thought." Eleanor sat beside her. "What will you do now, after all this is over?" "I'm leaving England. Paris, maybe. Or Rome. Somewhere I can start fresh without carrying all this history." Isabella's smile was sad. "There's nothing left for me here." "Isabella, it's not a tragedy, Eleanor. It's a choice." Isabella turned to face her. "For 5 years, I've been defined by what happened to me. By the scandal, by being Sebastian's lost love, by being the victim everyone pitied. I want to be someone else, someone new." Eleanor understood that. "Will you write?" "Maybe." If I have anything worth saying, Isabella stood. Take care of him, Eleanor. He needs someone who sees past the walls he builds. I will. And take care of yourself, too. Don't let his demons become yours. They embraced, awkward at first, then genuine. Two women who'd been rivals transformed into something like friends. Thank you, Isabella whispered, for saving my life, for finishing what I started. Thank you for starting it. Isabella left that afternoon. Eleanor watched her carriage disappear down the London streets and felt something shift. A chapter closing. A new one beginning. The verdicts came down 2 weeks later. Ashford. Guilty on all counts. Sentenced to 15 years. The two cabinet ministers stripped of their positions facing trial. The Duke at the top of the network. Found dead in his chambers before sentencing. The official report said heart failure. Eleanor suspected suicide. Parliament was in turmoil. The scandal had reached too far, exposed too much. There were calls for reform, for oversight, for fundamental changes to how the aristocracy operated. And somehow, Sebastian found himself at the center of it all. They want me to lead a reform committee, he told Eleanor over dinner one night, to create new regulations preventing this kind of corruption. Eleanor set down her wine. Do you want to? I don't know. It would mean more time in Parliament, more public exposure, more targets on our backs. He ran a hand through his hair. But if I don't do it, someone less committed might. Someone who'd water down the reforms until they're meaningless. Then you already know your answer. Sebastian looked at her. This will affect you too. As my wife, you'll be scrutinized, criticized. Every move you make will be analyzed. Sebastian. Eleanor reached across the table, took his hand. I knew what I was signing up for when I married you. And I definitely knew when I decided to expose a criminal conspiracy in front of the Queen. I can handle scrutiny. You shouldn't have to. Maybe not. But I choose to anyway. She squeezed his hand. We're partners, remember? Your battles are my battles. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They both laughed, and Eleanor realized this was what marriage was supposed to be. Not grand gestures or romantic declarations, just two people choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Sebastian took the position. The reform committee began its work, and Eleanor found herself pulled into it too, not officially, but practically. Peers' wives came to her for advice, for support, for permission to speak up about injustices they'd witnessed. She became an unofficial advocate, pushing for changes that would protect vulnerable women, limit aristocratic abuses of power, create accountability. You're becoming more influential than I am, Sebastian observed one evening, watching Eleanor draft a proposal for women's legal protections. Nonsense, you're the Duke. And you're the Duchess who took down a criminal empire. People listen to you. Eleanor set down her pen. Does that bother you? No. Sebastian's smile was genuine. It's probably the most attractive thing about you. Probably? Definitely. Though the way you look in that blue dress comes close. Eleanor threw a pillow at him. He caught it, laughing, and suddenly they were on the floor, kissing like teenagers, papers scattered everywhere. This was their life now. Work and passion and partnership all tangled together. 3 months after the verdicts, Beatrice hosted a dinner party. Small, intimate, just family and close friends. Eleanor helped plan it, her relationship with Sebastian's aunt having evolved into genuine friendship. You've done well, child, Beatrice said as they reviewed the seating arrangements. Better than I ever expected. Did you have such low expectations? I had realistic ones. Most women would have crumbled under the pressure you've faced. But you, Beatrice smiled. You've thrived. Eleanor considered that. Had she thrived? She'd been threatened, scrutinized, pushed to her absolute limits, but she'd also discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, had helped change laws, had built a real marriage from the ashes of a political arrangement. I had good teachers, Eleanor said. You had good instincts. I just helped sharpen them. The dinner party was lovely. Warm conversation, excellent food, laughter that felt earned. Pemberton was there with his wife, looking more relaxed than Eleanor had ever seen him. Thomas, promoted to head of the Blackthorn stables, sat beside Margaret, both of them blushing whenever they looked at each other. Even Mrs. Patterson attended, fussing over details, but clearly delighted to be included. Sebastian stood, raised his glass. A toast. To family, blood and chosen. To justice. And to new beginnings. To new beginnings, everyone echoed. Eleanor caught Sebastian's eye across the table. He smiled at her, private and warm, and she felt her chest expand with something that might have been happiness. Later, when the guests had gone and they were preparing for bed, Sebastian pulled out a small box. "I have something for you," he said. Eleanor took it, curious. Inside was a ring, not the Arkwright diamond she already wore, but something simpler. A sapphire surrounded by small pearls. "It was my mother's," Sebastian said quietly. "From before she married my father, when she was still herself." He took the ring, slipped it onto Eleanor's right hand. "I want you to have it, as a reminder that you don't have to lose yourself to be a duchess, that you can be both powerful and yourself." Eleanor's vision blurred. "Sebastian, I love you." The words came out rough, uncertain, like he wasn't used to saying them. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Somewhere between you breaking into my study and you facing down armed men in a warehouse. But I love you, Eleanor, for real. Not as a political ally or a convenient partner. As my wife. As you." Eleanor threw her arms around him, buried her face in his shoulder. "I love you too. You impossible, complicated, infuriating man." He laughed, held her tight. "We're a mess, aren't we? The best kind of mess." They made love that night, not for the first time since the gala, but for the first time with those words between them. It was clumsy and sweet and absolutely perfect. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Sebastian asked, "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me?" Eleanor considered. "I regret how it started. The coldness, the distance, but where we ended up." She kissed his chest. "No regrets at all. Not even when people send you death threats? Those just prove we're doing something right." Sebastian's laugh rumbled through his chest. "You're incredible." "I know." They fell asleep smiling. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the portrait gallery, studying the painting that had just been installed. The artist had captured her well. Midnight blue dress, Arkwright diamonds, her mother's sapphire ring visible on her right hand. But it was her expression that struck Eleanor. She looked strong, certain, like a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. "It's perfect," Sebastian said from behind her. Eleanor leaned back against him. "Think the future duchesses will wonder about me? I think they'll be inspired by you." He wrapped his arms around her waist. "The duchess who changed everything. We changed everything together. Yes, together." They stood that way for a long moment, surrounded by the ghosts of previous Arkwright marriages, some happy, most not. But Eleanor wasn't afraid of those ghosts anymore. She'd made her own place in this family, written her own story. Outside, London was changing. The reforms Sebastian's committee had pushed through were taking effect. Women had new legal protections. Blackmail victims had resources. The old systems of power and corruption were slowly, painfully being dismantled. It wasn't perfect. There was still resistance, still people who wanted things to go back to how they'd been. But change was happening, and Eleanor had helped make it happen. "I have news," Sebastian said suddenly. Eleanor turned to face him. "Good news or complicated news?" "Both?" He smiled nervously. "The Queen has asked me to serve as an advisor. Officially. It would mean more influence, more power to push reforms, but also more danger, more scrutiny." "Yes," Eleanor interrupted. "You don't even know what it entails." "Doesn't matter. If it means we can do more good, the answer is yes." She cupped his face. "I told you, Sebastian, your battles are my battles. Your purpose is my purpose." "When did I get so lucky?" "When you married a woman too stubborn to be ignored." He kissed her, deep and thorough. When they broke apart, both breathless, Eleanor said, "There's something I need to tell you, too." Sebastian's eyes widened. "Are you pregnant?" "No. Not yet, anyway." Eleanor took his hand. "But I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next. And I want to start a foundation for women who've been victimized the way Isabella was. Legal support, financial assistance, protection." Sebastian's expression softened. That's brilliant. It'll be expensive, time-consuming, potentially controversial. Eleanor, it's perfect. And of course you should do it. He paused. Do you want my help? I want your support. But this is mine. Something I build, something I lead. Eleanor's voice was firm. I love being your partner and everything else, but I need something that's just mine. Then it's yours. Sebastian kissed her forehead. Build your empire, Duchess. Eleanor smiled. I intend to. The foundation launched 3 months later. Eleanor threw herself into it with the same intensity she'd brought to exposing Ashford's network. She recruited staff, secured funding, established protocols. Within 6 months, they'd helped 40 women. Within a year, over 200. The work was hard, often heartbreaking, but it was also deeply fulfilling. Eleanor had found her purpose, not just as Sebastian's wife, but as herself. One evening, a year and a half after the royal gala, Eleanor came home to find Sebastian in his study, staring at a letter. What's wrong? She asked. He looked up, his expression complicated. Isabella wrote, From Paris. Eleanor's chest tightened slightly. Old jealousy she thought she'd conquered trying to resurface. What did she say? She's well, happy, working as a translator. Sebastian handed her the letter. She wanted to thank us for giving her the chance to rebuild her life. Eleanor scanned the letter. Isabella's handwriting was elegant, her words genuine. At the bottom, a postscript. Take care of each other. What you've built together is rare and precious. Don't take it for granted. Eleanor folded the letter carefully. She's right. What we have is rare. Does it bother you that I kept the letter? No. Eleanor realized she meant it. She was part of your life, part of our story. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. She moved to Sebastian, wrapped her arms around him. But she's the past, Sebastian. I'm the present, and hopefully the future. Definitely the future. He kissed her. I'm thinking at least 50 more years of you bossing me around and changing the world. Only 50? I was aiming for 60 at minimum. They both laughed, and Eleanor realized this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past, but not being controlled by it either. 2 years after the gala, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She told Sebastian over breakfast, casual as discussing the weather. I saw the doctor yesterday. We're having a baby. Sebastian dropped his fork. What? A baby, small human, due in about 7 months. He stared at her, speechless. Then he was around the table, pulling her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. We're having a baby, he repeated, like he couldn't believe it. Are you happy? Eleanor asked, suddenly uncertain. Happy? Eleanor, He pulled back to look at her. I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. How are you this calm? I've had a day to process. You've had 30 seconds. He kissed her, gentle and reverent. We're going to be parents. Terrible ones, probably. But we'll figure it out. Together. Always together. The pregnancy was difficult. Eleanor was sick constantly, exhausted beyond measure. But she kept working, kept running her foundation, kept being herself. Sebastian hovered, overprotective and slightly panicked. You need to rest, he said for the 1,000th time. I need to finish reviewing these applications. Eleanor, Sebastian, I appreciate the concern, but I'm pregnant, not dying. She softened her tone. I promise to be careful, but I won't stop living my life because there's a baby on the way. He learned to back off, mostly. Their daughter was born on a cold March morning, screaming loud enough to wake the entire manor. She had Sebastian's dark hair and Eleanor's stubborn chin. They named her Catherine, after Sebastian's mother. Holding her for the first time, Eleanor felt something shift. This tiny human was the future. The reason all their fighting and struggling and risking had mattered. She's perfect, Sebastian whispered, his finger clutched in Catherine's tiny fist. She's going to be trouble, Eleanor corrected. Look at those eyes. That's the look of someone planning rebellion. Takes after her mother, then. Eleanor laughed, exhausted and deliriously happy. Poor thing, she's doomed. Catherine grew into exactly the kind of child Eleanor had predicted. Brilliant, stubborn, determined to change the world before she could properly walk. Sebastian was completely wrapped around her tiny finger within days. "You're spoiling her," Eleanor observed, watching Sebastian build an elaborate tower of blocks at their daughter's imperious demand. "She's brilliant. Brilliance should be encouraged." "She's 10 months old, Sebastian." "Exactly. Advanced for her age." Eleanor shook her head, smiling. This was their life now, debates over block towers and midnight feedings and the terrifying, wonderful responsibility of raising a child who'd inherit both their stubborn natures. On Catherine's first birthday, Eleanor stood in the portrait gallery again. Her painting hung beside Sebastian's now, both of them immortalized. And soon there'd be a painting of all three of them, the Duke, Duchess, and their heir. "Thinking deep thoughts?" Sebastian asked. Catherine balanced on his hip. "Thinking about how far we've come. From a cold political marriage to Eleanor gestured at them. "This. Chaos and sleepless nights and baby spit up on everything. Love, family, purpose." Eleanor touched Catherine's cheek. "Everything that matters." Sebastian shifted Catherine to one arm, pulled Eleanor close with the other. "I was wrong about so many things when I married you, but I was right about one thing." "What's that?" "You were exactly what I needed, even when I was too stupid to realize it. Took you long enough to figure it out." "Better late than never?" Eleanor kissed him, careful not to squish Catherine between them. "Much better." They stood there, the three of them, surrounded by the ghosts of previous Arkwright generations. But those ghosts didn't seem so intimidating anymore. They were just people who'd tried to build lives, make choices, find happiness in a complicated world, just like Eleanor and Sebastian were doing now. "What do you think she'll be?" Sebastian wondered, looking at Catherine. "When she grows up?" "Trouble, definitely. Beyond that?" Eleanor smiled. "Whatever she wants to be. We'll make sure she has that choice." "Even if she wants to be a pirate?" "Especially if she wants to be a pirate. Though I draw the line at highway robbery." Sebastian laughed. Catherine gurgled happily, oblivious to her parents' ridiculousness. This was the life Eleanor had never imagined wanting. The life she'd fought for without realizing what she was fighting for. And it was better. Messier, more complicated, more real than anything she could have planned. 5 years after the royal gala, Eleanor stood before Parliament, the first woman ever invited to address them directly. The chamber was packed, every seat filled, every eye on her. She wasn't nervous. She'd faced worse than politicians. "Gentlemen," she began, "I'm here to discuss the Women's Protection Act and why its passage is not just morally necessary, but politically inevitable." She spoke for 20 minutes, laid out the evidence, the testimonials, the undeniable logic of legal protections for vulnerable women. She was compelling, articulate, impossible to ignore. When she finished, the chamber erupted, some in applause, some in outrage. But everyone was talking. Everyone was listening. That was all Eleanor needed. The act passed 3 months later. Not perfect, not comprehensive, but a start. A foundation to build on. Sebastian met her outside Parliament after the final vote, Catherine, now 5 years old and precociously articulate, bouncing beside him. "Mama!" Catherine launched herself at Eleanor. "Papa said you won!" "We won, sweetheart, all of us together. Can we celebrate with cake?" Eleanor laughed. "Absolutely, the biggest cake we can find." As they walked through London, Catherine chattering between them, Eleanor caught Sebastian's eye. He smiled at her, that private smile that still made her heart skip. They'd started as strangers bound by political necessity, had become allies in a war against corruption, had somehow, impossibly, fallen in love along the way. And now they were this: a family, partners, equals in every way that mattered. "Happy?" Sebastian asked quietly. Eleanor looked at her daughter's bright eyes, her husband's loving expression, the city that was slowly changing because people had been brave enough to demand better. "Deliriously," she answered, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real, messy and complicated and hard-won. They'd fought for every moment of happiness, earned every inch of trust. They'd taken a cold political marriage and forged it into something unbreakable. That night, after Catherine was asleep and the celebration was over, Eleanor and Sebastian sat in his study. Their study now, shared space like everything else in their lives. Do you ever think about how it could have gone differently? Sebastian asked. If you'd been less brave, or I'd been more stubborn, or any number of things had changed. Eleanor considered. Sometimes. But then I remember we chose this. Every day we chose each other, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Do you regret any of it? Not a single moment. Eleanor moved to sit on his lap, wrapped her arms around his neck. Do you? Only that it took me so long to see what was right in front of me. He kissed her softly. But I see you now, Eleanor. I see exactly who you are and what you're capable of. And I'm in awe every single day. Good. Eleanor kissed him back. You should be. They both laughed, and somewhere in the manor, Catherine called out in her sleep. Eleanor started to rise, but Sebastian stopped her. I'll go. You've conquered Parliament today. That's enough for one person. He left, and Eleanor sat alone in the study, surrounded by years of work and evidence and change they'd fought for together. The portraits in the gallery would tell their story to future generations. The laws they'd helped pass would protect people they'd never meet. The foundation Eleanor had built would continue long after she was gone. But more than any of that, they'd proved that even the coldest arrangements could transform into the warmest love. That partnership built on respect and trust was stronger than passion built on nothing. That sometimes the best marriages were the ones you had to fight for. Sebastian returned, stood in the doorway. She's back asleep. Had a nightmare about pirates, apparently. Did you tell her pirates aren't real? Are you kidding? I told her that if pirates did exist, she'd definitely be the captain. Eleanor shook her head, smiling. You're impossible. You love me anyway. Unfortunately, yes. He crossed to her, pulled her to her feet. Dance with me. There's no music. So we'll make our own. They swayed together in the quiet study. No music but their heartbeats. No witnesses but the books and papers that documented their war and their victory. This is everything I never knew I wanted, Eleanor whispered. Me too. Sebastian held her closer. Me too. And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of their shared purpose and shared love, Eleanor understood what they'd really accomplished. They hadn't just exposed corruption or passed laws or built a foundation. They'd proven that two people could meet as strangers, marry as allies, and become something greater than either could have been alone. They'd proven that love worth having was love worth fighting for. They'd proven that the strongest marriages were built not on perfect beginnings, but on choosing each other again and again, through every challenge, every danger, every moment of doubt. The Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn had started as a cold alliance forged in political necessity. They'd become an unbreakable partnership built on truth, respect, and hard-won love. And they were just beginning.